This is a dialogue. It's not a debate.
There's no evidence.
God commanded genocide of people multiple times in the Bible.
He wants to be his own God. He doesn't want to submit to an authoritative God who created him.
They are possessed by a demon. I'm going to cast that thing out.
Is there anything your child could do that would make you want to lock them in the closet and set the house on fire?
No.
Oh, then I think Nick definitely has a better morality than your God.
Well, you ask really good questions.
We were out there 4 days later, and the guy walked out, and he had a full nose. I didn't even recognize him.
The Miracles and Atheists podcast, unpacking the tension between different worldviews of the supernatural.
Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is Nick Snap. Good evening. Yeah, I'm here with Jason Duramo. Welcome to the Miracles and Atheists community call-in. We call it the MACC, affectionately call it the MACC. What is that? Well, it's a topical-based call-in show format, which is a relatively new thing for us. In fact, I had a lot of trouble getting the call-in thing working, so I might have to do a little bit more troubleshooting as we're getting on here. But you can call us when we're ready at 919-301-9045. Let me put that up there. I think it works like that, 919-301-9045. And we like to look at specific topics. Most of the time, it's a controversial topic or it's a concern that frequently comes up in skeptic communities having to do with following Jesus. We break down this topic or this concern the best we know how and attempt to provide a reasonable response and be as objective as possible. I'm making a conscious effort to listen, to get to the heart of the matter, to seek truth. And Jason, speaking of topics, tonight we're going to talk about Russia and Ukraine. What? I'll get into why in a few minutes there, but I do want to introduce my man to, I guess it's to your right, my left, Jason Duramo. He's an apologist, evangelist, theologian. He's a lifelong student of the Bible. He likes to go deep and take more of an academic approach to our topic of study. He does a lot of work on college campuses here in North Carolina, and he has a platform called the 4campus.org. So Jason and those watching right now, for past nearly 3 years with the COVID, we've been paying a little bit more attention to current events and what's really going on in the world. And it's been rather challenging to decipher truth. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Well, here on this MACC platform, we prefer to talk about spiritual topics, things like that, but we really can't avoid or ignore these world events because for me, I want to seek truth. And it seems there's always something behind what we're being told by the media. So what is the truth? Maybe it's like pure deception. Maybe there's a spiritual agenda behind the things that we're seeing. So I thought there'd be a ton of value in taking a look at current political and social events like Russia and Ukraine for the next 90 minutes or so and dissect the foundations behind the narratives and see what we can tease out. Further, I like to be challenged, and so does Jason. And we want to hear the perspectives of people who don't think like we do, especially skeptics and atheists, because, well, y'all are known for being skeptical. And this evening, I am grateful. We have two skeptic guests joining us. ObjectivelyDan, bringing Dan on here, and we're just going to call him Puck because I think that's his preferred, way of looking at things or, being responded to. They're self-proclaimed atheists who I'm excited to have on our call tonight. I'm hoping they'll be able to use the tools they keep in their skeptics toolbox, the tools that they've learned to master to ask the tough questions about these narratives and seek truth with us. Because I'm sure no matter what our worldviews, whether Christian, atheist, Buddhist, we all want to know what's going on. No one likes to be lied to. So, what do you think, Jason?
Yeah, look forward to the show.
Well, Dan Puck, welcome to the Miracles and Atheists community call.
For the record, I like to call him Puckulus. I think Puckulus is a good one. So I think that works too.
How about Pucculent? My wife's in
Pucculent
plants. She's been talking about succulent, gardening and whatnot. So Pucculent might be a good way to look at it too.
I like that personally, but that's not my name, so I can't say. Hey guys, thanks for having me on, and also thanks for bringing this guy on over here, who's also hosted a lot of shows with me over on my program, Truth Wanted. So happy to talk to you guys.
Great. Yeah. Well, introduce you real quick. Objectively Dan, without a space between Objectively and Dan, ex-Christian, igtheist. Did I say that right? Is it igtheist or igtheist?
Igtheist. Yeah, that's right.
And sentientist.
Yeah.
Look those words up, and I'd love to hear you define them, but I did look them up because I didn't know what those were. But you're the creator and host of the Truth Wanted talk show, where the goal is to get to the bottom of beliefs, whether it's karma or Christ, Bigfoot or crystals. Truth Wanted would like to know how you know it's true, and we would like to know that as well, Dan. So appreciate that, man. You take calls from the community, like we do here on the MACC, emphasizing through conversations over name calling and scoffing. That is a really, really big plus most of the time, you say. And you focus on how and why people believe what they believe and how you can talk about beliefs in more effective ways. Good stuff. You go to youtube.com/Truth Wanted and find Dan. So yeah, welcome again, man.
Thank you. Yeah. So call-in show thing, I'm pretty used to that. So, this will hopefully go pretty smoothly for me.
Well, I hope it goes smoothly and that I can actually get the call-in number working. But hopefully Jason will be able to kind of keep things going while I figure that out. I need anybody want to volunteer for the MACC live stream admin role? Pays really well. We'll get to the payment once you sign up.
Nose goes, right?
Alex Puck Dalfoist. Did I say your name? Okay.
No, that works. That's good.
With a star in between. Yeah. So you're from Anchorage, Alaska.
Yes.
Now in Cincinnati.
Yes.
You were raised Catholic, and you've been atheist for about 20 years.
Yes.
You're not much over 20, though. Is that right?
Oh, wow. That's very generous of you. No, I'm actually over 40, but thank you.
All right. You did a few short shows with Objectively Dan, as somebody mentioned already, I think with Dan over the past couple of years. So now you're a game designer and you spend most of your free time playing video games.
Yes.
Cincinnati. Wow.
Yeah, and it's wow. It's been almost a year, Dan, since we've been on screen together, I think.
Yeah, it has been a little bit. So I'm excited.
This is a big reunion for us. So this is bringing back old times.
Although we've talked about doing some more stuff together, so hopefully that'll happen in the near future. We'll see.
Yeah.
Love that we're the catalyst for bringing this relationship back together. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wow, guys, Russia and Ukraine, right? So, so much we could dive into here. So we're probably not even going to go scratch the surface, but this came up because I asked Dan if he was interested in politics, because I had this thing I wanted to see about politics, and he responded, quote, "I'm keeping up with politics, scared about the Russia stuff." So I thought, okay, well, let's do this. So to kick this off, Dan, I'll give you an opportunity to comment on what I'm about to say. But here's what I've learned so far from the mainstream media. All right. Russia's really, really bad. Putin is a tyrannical, power-hungry dictator who wants Ukraine back at any and all costs. So he can. What he did is he commanded an quote unquote unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And poor Vladimir Zelenskyy is fighting hard to save his country. He's actually participating as a soldier in a lot of the footage I've seen. He needs money to feed, clothe, and shelter his Ukrainian people. And because Russia stripped them of all these basic necessities. He's fighting so hard, he's sacrificing to host like gala banquets with Sean Penn and other celebrities. He's an example of a brave hero that we should all try to exemplify. So before you respond to that summary, I want to open up with a little humor because I think it might do well. Many of you know Zelenskyy, he's a former comedian. Did you guys know that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's all get a little laugh before we get a little heavy. How about that? So I'm going to pull this thing up and share my screen here. If I can pull that off. Let me see. Let's hope the tech works. All right. Just as we're installing here, what platform do y'all use to stream?
So for the Atheist Community of Austin's content, we use something called Rendezvous, which I don't know if I could recommend it to everybody. It's a pain in the ass, but it works for us.
Okay.
I use Twitch, but Twitch doesn't have a multi-user compatibility like this as of right now. I've never had a host like this or hosted other people like this on my channel other than through Discord voice chat. So this is the kind of streaming that I typically do right now. This wouldn't be possible on it.
Okay, well, All right. Well, that's not helpful for me, but we'll keep on rolling. All right. So I'm gonna I think this is gonna work. I hope so. I'm actually hardwired, so I'm gonna allow this to share. And do we have? Yes, we do. All right. Here you go. Let's see if you all can hear it. Here we go. This is President Zelenskyy, and here we go. It's stepping.
Да ладно, чё, куда мне тащите здесь? О, Рамзан Ахматович, доброго вечера. Рамзан Ахматович.
You know, guys, I'm gonna pause. Let me do this again. We got a little. Yeah, I thought that was maybe because I was on Wi-Fi last time, but let me see if I can like take us all off. And maybe if anybody has any tips on sharing videos while streaming and stalling, appreciate that. But let me do a little refresh here.
You always have to have a story in your back pocket that you're able to bring out at any moment. You know, that's what I've learned.
Yes. So we're gonna try this one more time and stream and share because this is some really good stuff. And I wouldn't feel right if we just kind of let it go. So, let's do it one more time.
I'm pulling up Russian jokes.
Are you? It might help. Here we go. Screen 3. Screen 1. Let's do it. And allow and action, maybe. You guys can see him there, though, right?
Ну, я говорил уже вам, что следующая остановка в Грозном. Правильно? Вы в Грозном?
Правильно говорили. Я здесь.
That's Zelenskyy. That.
Простите, засранца. Был глуп, был молод и горяч. В основном горяч. Рамзан Ахматович, прошу вас, возьмите меня к себе в батальон Ахмат.
Should I punt, guys? I think I'm going to punt.
У меня есть.
I think I'm going to punt. All right. Sorry about that. That was a classic fail. We'll figure that one out later. So essentially, Zelensky's talking to this like Ukrainian presidential type figure, and his nose is white, and he talks about pooping pants and being free, and at the very end of it, he says, "Do you have more flour?" I guess they call drugs Coke or whatever he has on the nose, flour. So yeah, it would have been good for you to see it. But what I'll do instead, I'm going to put a link here for you guys to see that yourself in the old comments.
Yeah, I tried looking at some jokes, but I think they're all in it's like Russian humor, so I didn't get it.
Yeah. Here's the link here from Miracles and Atheists to you, Zelenskyy. All right. Well, all right. I'll let you guys comment on my summary of the mainstream narrative now that I took care of that. And made it weird.
Let's see. Puck, you want to go first, or
no? Well, I mean, the first question I have is your choice of media platform over here. Like, is this video anywhere else? Was it found anywhere else? What's the source of this? Where is this from? If it's on Rumble, then it seems reasonable that we can find this in other places also. So where else is this? Yeah. I'm totally up for the idea that this is parody. I mean, if it is, cool. But my initial question is, can we find any other verification that this is what it's purported to be?
You'd have to watch the video and see that it's either Zelenskyy or a double, right? I mean, it's him. I mean, I wasn't really. I was talking when I talked about my summary, Puck. I was talking about like my summary of the mainstream media of how we should be thinking about Russia and Ukraine. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about that? Instead of the humor. I mean,
he was talking about the narrative he gave earlier about what we should be thinking about Ukraine. Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, okay. So, as someone who's studied a little bit of Russian history and the college level, because that's what they make you do when you're in Alaska.
That makes sense.
No, so this is where I come from. Okay, that there is a tremendous amount to this. Like I knew about this show for about give or take a couple weeks now, since we picked the topic, and through all of that, through all the digging that I've done, trying to go as far back to the sources as much as I can, study as much Russian history. There's no meaningful way that even in 2 weeks I can get enough information to come in here and definitively state anything at all about what's going on, and especially when you start trying to figure out what people's intentions are. that when you start to try to figure out other people's mindsets or mental states, that's the more you do that, the less likely you are to get the right one. Like, for example, I could ask you, why am I on this show? And there could be a large number of reasons. And even if I told you directly what my reason for being on the show is, you might have reason to doubt that. You might have reason to more believe that. You could go do something like, I don't know, look back at my previous body of work and see, is this something consistent with what Puck said to us? And then even then you could say, well, okay, he said that, but maybe he's being deceptive. And so the study of current events in history is a lot like that. Where you have all this stuff, and as soon as they start saying, well, it's because he's thinking this or he feels this way or he has this intent, that's when it starts to veer for me. Okay. And that's where I start to say, okay, how do we know intentions other than it's not unreasonable to guess that, but we still don't know. So where I'm coming from with this is, no matter how much research anybody has done, unless you're like deeply studied into this, there's no way I could have done enough research. And anybody in the audience right now who is hoping that in 1 hour we're going to be able to give you all the answers about the Russian conflict, it's not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen in an hour. There's no way it's going to happen in a year because there's too much to it. Now, that being said, we still have to make some sort of decision. What do we think about this? How do we feel about this? And this, I think, is where the more interesting question is. And I think that's where the big differences are going to be between the four of us. Is we all have access to the same things, but we're all going to process in a very different ways. And it's the processing of those that is the most interesting to me, and that I think that we would have the most to talk about, rather than the specifics of Russia and Ukraine. But go ahead. Like the first question I had is your choice of platform of Rumble to show this video. So where else is this video, and what else can we know about the comedy from this?
Well, I think Puck, actually, I might be able to answer that, because Zelenskyy was a comedian, right? So this is his rise to power is really interesting, because his comedy thing was from like 2015, if I recall, where, and if this is from the same show, he's like playing a history teacher, and he ends up, a student kind of films him, and he ends up becoming like the leader of the nation in the show, and then, like, I guess art imitates life, and he actually became leader of the nation. If that's the same video, I think that's where that's coming from.
It might have been like the beginning of it. Yeah, he started as a prisoner and maybe rose to power or something. I don't know the.
Yeah. So the thing about
prisoner in this particular.
Zelensky's wild. Zelensky's wild. He has crazy. I mean, he says crazy shit. I don't actually really care so much about Zelenskyy and what he's doing. I do think it's cool that he's out there, with the troops and on the front lines motivating people. He's clearly won the world's heart. But to me, it goes back to how we should view this invasion, right? Whether it is a legitimate invasion. I think it is a legitimate invasion. Ukraine has already had referendums, specifically in 1991, about independence, and with the exception of like people in Crimea, like overwhelmingly, it's been they want to stay as an independent nation. So this sort of political posturing from Putin saying, "Oh, we're actually freeing these people from these Nazis," like it is pure propaganda, and you don't have to like believe in American media to like look at that. There's lots of people that have been reporting about the various atrocities of Putin for a number of years, even before he was first trying to annex this shit back in can't believe it's like 2014 now, which is crazy. Because I was a senior in high school in 2014 when I remember when that happened. But it's purely an act of aggression. I think the world is definitely seeing that. There's more people in the recent UN vote that have voted more in strong condemnation of the annexation than they did the previous time they voted. Even though there are some abstaining, I think there are people that are really waking up and seeing that this whole thing wasn't a good idea. So, as far as the ongoing media narratives, are they accurate? I mean, yeah. I mean, I think what you gave in summary is fairly accurate. Again, Zelensky's kind of wild. I don't know if he's the best person for the job, but there's no person that's best person for the job as president or prime minister, because they're all just bad roles to begin with. But that's a whole other take, So
Appreciate that. Wow. Okay. And I think Jason, you might share similar sentiments about Russia. Is that right?
I have a few different perspectives. I think in, what Alex was saying is you're not going to get it all covered in one episode or one show. There's a lot of history. I remember I took some courses in my political science undergrad, and we had to learn a little bit about Russia. And I mean, it goes all the way back. I mean, if you want to look at, the Bolshevik Revolution, you look at how socialism and Marxism have come into play, and the reforms have happened in the current issues. Like, actually talk to somebody who has some more insight, having been from that part of the world. And I got some perspectives from her. And I think maybe this might lend into the conversation about worldview, because I think there's some misconceptions that that Russia, or at least the culture there, is predominantly Christian or some orthodoxy, but then there's other perspectives that it's actually really still very much atheistic, and communism blends into that and their ideologies. So I think you're seeing kind of an amalgamation of a little bit of people wanting to get out of that old kind of Soviet era, mindset, the ex-KGB type mindset. We want to reform, and they're having some problems, obviously, in that part of the world with keeping all these former states intact and kind of, federated. And then the other side is you have kind of like these historic Soviet era kind of Cold War reminiscent systems, these power brokers and oligarchs and stakeholders that have a vested interest in keeping these states and territories united for political reasons, military reasons. And obviously, I'm looking at it from the worldview perspective. What is the driving force behind the aggression? And there's a biblical aspect of this too we can get into. Is there prophetic implications in place for this? And so maybe we can unpack that later and figure out, why are we still having problems with Russia over the past century?
All right. Well, thanks for writing that down, man. What do you guys think about the U.S. involvement in Ukraine over the course of the history? So,
I see we're starting with the softball questions. Okay, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we only got an hour and a half there, so we might as well jump into it. Why such the interest in Ukraine? Looking at Ukraine is very complex, like you said, but do you all think Ukraine's on the up and up, or is there some, obviously every nation's got some corruption, but one of the claims is that there very, very deep corruption in Ukraine. Dan, you made the comment that Putin's all of his stuff is propaganda. One thing about Putin, and I'll just use the phrase, I'll just use deep state. Putin appears in his language to hate everything deep state. And what do you guys think about? I don't want to get into what is the deep state and everything, but who runs the world, right? So I'll give you some examples. So if you go to any product, whether it's Apple, whether it's Whole Foods, military equipment, Facebook, anything that's publicly traded, and you go to who are the owners of these companies, I'll go kind of back to the same groups, right? There's BlackRock and Vanguard, right? And then so there's the worldview that these people in these particular groups pretty much run everything. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about there being sort of a hub for the deep state and the idea that these folks are in Ukraine and there's a systematic,
they want to enslave the world.
Procedure.
Yeah.
Wait, what is the claim? You're saying there's a systematic what's happening?
Like I said, that Putin is systematically taking out various things in Ukraine to sort of shut down the deep state. What do you think of that claim?
I mean, I don't think you have to bomb civilians to do that. Well, so here's the thing, right? Look, Ukraine could be the most corrupt nation on earth. Is the United States not incredibly corrupt? I think I don't have to agree with, I don't think anyone on this panel is going to disagree with me. If Canada decide to invade the United States tomorrow because of our corruption, would we claim that that's a legitimate reason? I mean, none of us would say that. So I don't think the calls for Ukraine is a corrupt nation and therefore the Russian people are the best people to come in and again kill civilians and completely disrupt people's lives and world industries and economies. I don't think that's legitimate at all. I mean, Putin has put out the narrative as to the reasons why he wants to come. In his mind, he is liberating an area that has been allegedly oppressed by Ukraine. I think he's trying to convince Russian citizens of that more than anything. I don't think he's convincing a lot of Ukrainian people of that. The people who want to stay in Ukraine, they're having to leave even if they want to or not. There's people in Russia who are happy to leave and who are happy to escape the conscription of this war because they truly don't believe that what's happening is what Putin says it is.
You don't think Ukrainians want to go to Russia, or that think many Ukrainians out there that actually are embracing the Russian troops?
I mean, have you seen any reports of Ukrainians escaping to Russia? I've seen a lot of Russians escaping to other countries. I haven't seen any Ukrainians trying to get to Russia anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually. Ukrainians leaving Russia. I mean, do you think that there's Nazis in Ukraine? Or is that,
of course, there's Nazis everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the hub of the German Nazis actually end up migrating to Ukraine, and they've been sort of there, and the U.S. has been supporting them for the last 60 years. Have you ever heard any of those kind of claims?
The U.S. supporting Nazis in Ukraine, doing what exactly?
What's the U.S. doing? Oh, that's the question. What is the U.S. doing to?
Well, I don't know. You tell me. That was a separate question you asked, right? What should U.S. foreign policy be on the matter? But I mean, look, we've got Nazi rallies happening here. I've seen more of that happen. I mean, look, there are videos and stuff, and you see, there's concentrations of Nazis doing stuff like on a civilian level in Ukraine. I've never seen the state acting as a Nazi entity in Ukraine. I'd love to see that, but
like in 2014, right? That was you guys know about the Orange Revolution or Color Revolution in 2014, how that started. So, in your opinion, what started all that?
The Color Revolution?
Yeah, and specifically the Orange Revolution.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I could speak competently to the causes of the Color Revolution without talking about it for like an hour, like Puck was saying. I mean, that goes a deep political history here, but if we're just examining the claims of, are there Nazis currently operating in Ukraine?
Right.
I mean, I like to know who they are or what it is. And again, let's say that there are Nazi actors even in the state in Ukraine. Does that justify Putin's invasion of these cities and of this country? And I would say no. I don't think anybody would agree with that, even if that was true, right? So,
well, I guess I don't know if it justifies or not, but what's the plans for the Nazis in the world and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, what are they actually doing? There's got to be something behind it other than just I want to invade and take out Nazis. The Nazis got to be doing something to try to even the worst.
Oh, what's Putin's actual? No, well, okay. So that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, Ukraine, along with Georgia, Armenia, everywhere else. I mean, that was former Soviet Union territory, right? This is all part of the former Soviet Union, and on top of this, Ukraine has been on the cusp of getting NATO status for years, right?
Is that a good thing?
I mean, I would say so, yes. But NATO status for Russia is a very big problem, because if you're a NATO ally, then you are under obligation to be protected. And if you're under that obligation to be protected, you also get to share in that military technology, including, but maybe not limited to, nuclear technology. They could start housing stuff there. They're already talking about moving stuff to Poland right now. But that gets just a little bit closer to that Russian border, which is a detriment to Putin's idea of the Russian Empire. He doesn't want Ukraine to be independent. He wants it to be part of a greater Russian identity.
So with the going kind of, I see what you're saying. There's a lot. You're right here, Puck. There's so much here. It's like in a million different directions.
It's a good point, though, because what does that say about your country if you can't maintain good relations with your neighbors? It says that, I mean, imagine if people, hey, we have states here that want to secede from the union, right? But if you can't keep your neighbors, unified, then you have some problems in your backyard. So it's I don't know. I'm not really so much in the politics of it. I'm more so in the motivations. maybe we can unpack that.
Jason's in the spiritual side.
I'm actually with Jason. Like the individual politics don't interest me as much as the where we're going with it. And
let's get down to the brass tacks
how we
here.
interpret all this. Because like the thing about Ukraine having so many different. I mean, Ukraine's a big place, right? And Russia is an even bigger place. And throughout Russia, there's like 100 million people. I don't know. And in any place that size, you're going to get a large number of different ethnic groups, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different cultures in there. And the people who live those cultures and the people who draw the boundaries aren't always the same people, and they don't always play very nicely with each other. So when you make a boundary, which in a lot of cases is kind of arbitrary and doesn't really consult the people who want boundaries drawn around them, you're going to get these conflicts. You're going to get, who did we really want to belong to? I don't know. Are there some people in Ukraine who wish that they were part of Russia? Probably. Are they, so to say like this is Ukraine and then this is Russia, and then to insist that they all think in the single mind, you're never going to get that. I mean, you don't even get that in Texas. You don't like not everybody in Texas is and talk about seceding. I think in every election cycle somebody's talking about Texas finally breaking from the nation, or California or something like that.
Yeah, California's okay. They can go. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's more interesting to me, and yeah, I mean, this is interesting stuff to talk about. But then when we start talking about intents, when we start looking at specific people and saying, well, this is what this person is thinking, and this is why this person wants to do it. I don't know, and that's where the skeptic in me comes in. It's like I can't guess anybody's intents. So what's more important to me is I think Jason is going to go here too. It's like, how do we make the decision, and more importantly, what is behind the scenes of those decisions? Like what's scooching us toward one side or the other, and that's the more interesting side to me.
And that's where worldview sort of backs. Do you believe then, Puck, that your worldview, your atheistic worldview, or our Christian worldview would skew us to a certain direction about why someone, or to believe why something's happening? Is that kind of
how there do we want to go yet? Because I thought that would be like the big conclusion, but I think this is.
I guess is that your inference though? Is that that's what you're kind of.
No, it is. But that's like one of the big questions that I've always had, and one of the big differences between one thing that I've seen with, and I absolutely will not speak for all atheists, and I will not, and I'm not going to say something like Christians do this, but this is one common thread that I see, that. Kind of like built into the Christian worldview, the theistic worldview, is the idea that you can, and like it's okay to guess intentions, and it's okay to guess motivations, and not only that, but it's okay to spread your opinion about what those motivations are as if they're true. Okay, like the most popular thing, you've probably heard this is they only want to be atheists so they can sin, right?
Yeah.
That gets better. And I'm not saying that there's nobody who does that, all right? But the vast majority of atheists who talk to, it didn't even occur to us, okay? That's not why I did. That's not why Dan did.
No, that's why I did it, actually, Puck. I just
you were just in it. Yeah, I was in it for the sin and debauchery and
exactly.
drunken orgies. There aren't nearly as many drunken orgies as I thought there would be.
We still sin too. A lot.
Oh yes. I remember. I know the answer. The difference is you're forgiven.
No. Hey man, you should listen to more of the episodes now. No, it's
okay. No.
Here's
okay,
something.
but so that is one of the things where you guys have Bible verses like that say something like, well, the truth is given to everybody, and it's because they suppress it in their own unrighteousness, or something like that. So guessing intents and applying intent, even if it's not true, is something that's okay on one camp, but that's something that Dan and I wouldn't do.
Okay, no, that's good. That's a good place to start. I want to get into some of the nitty gritty about you.
I want to put this out.
Let's let it go. Let's just let it go.
I really respect what you like. You guys actually do the work. You guys just don't drop in on the convos and like want to just throw some shade. Like I could tell you guys do the deep work. I've watched a few episodes. I've looked at some of the street epistemology. You've done a lot of research. So it's not like, oh yeah, all atheists, they don't really want to go in the deep stuff. No, you guys have done it. The thing I would say the differentiator is like when we're talking about, so the platform's miracles and atheists, right? There's supernatural aspects. There's an experiential aspect that overlays what we observe in reality. And so really what it comes down to is there's an encounter that we are trying to explain that there are things that exist outside of our temporal material understanding. And that's what I think drives more of the conversation points is, yeah, we can argue over epistemology and all the various claims of reality and logic and all that. But when it comes down to it, where the separator is, there's something supernatural at play. Let's talk about that. What is there room for phenomena? Can we actually address these things and have a conversation on that? So we're not arguing over the politics and semantics. Like maybe an example would be, okay, what overlays the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict? Are there powers and principalities and, people that have a vested interest in seeing the world destroyed, and why? What's the motivation?
That's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah.
Because if everyone wants this utopian ideal, but you have to destroy the world to get it, then let's go to the heart level. What's wrong with the human heart? How can we fix that? What's the standard at which we can approach how to love one another?
Jason, have you seen that TikTok of that girl that's like, I wish I was your mother? He's talking about Putin. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but please.
Write it down, though.
When you said that, it just reminded me, this girl on TikTok posted this whole thing saying, oh, like basically Putin, I wish I was your mom so I could like, the conclusion was so I could like raise you better so you didn't have such hatefulness in your heart. And that's what that reminded me of. But like, honestly, like, look, politicians, look, if you're a president, if you're a prime minister, if you're in any position of that power, like you have to be like a little bit crazy, right? that is seriously, that is my conclusion. I don't think it's healthy for anybody to be in that position and to affect that level of change on human civilization as a whole. You cannot be a good person. You just can't. The position isn't set up for you to be a good person.
We're in agreement. You have to be willing to take all of that on yourself and your family and drag. Yeah.
A lot going on there. Yeah.
And so like when you're with Vladimir Putin in particular, we're talking about like a million different things here. I hope I'm making coherent sense because we're going back and forth on like the broadest philosophical topics. But whether Putin's an atheist or an Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Christian, honestly, genuinely, almost doesn't even matter because he hasn't cited any of his religious convictions for anything that he's done. If anything, his ideology is nationalistic in nature. He wants what's best for what he believes is best for the Russian people and the Russian Empire, specifically against the West, which he considers to be not only the greatest threat to Russia, but the greatest threat to the world at large. Like, I think he's made that extremely clear in his rhetoric, right? So everybody's fueled by ideologies, whether they be religious, nationalistic, whatever, like that's going to be the ultimate driving force. If you want to call that a spiritual or a mystic interpretation, I think you're free to do that. But like that's what's at the heart of it, in my opinion.
I can kind of put some spiritual context to what you said, as far as you need to be a little bit crazy to kind of be in these positions, right? And this is something I've been kind of thinking about as, somebody that does study the Bible. When Jesus said, the devil's the god of this world, right? It says, God of this world. What does that even mean? And you're like, well, I thought God was the god of this world, but the Bible actually says that Satan has dominion in this world. He was given dominion over it. So if you take it to a spiritual context and try to like see that fully kind of think that through, if that were a true claim, as a Christian, I do believe it's true, then okay, if you would worship the god of this world, if you worship Satan, then wouldn't you'd get the things that the god of this world has. So would we logically know these people? Because they kind of be at the top, wouldn't they? And if somebody's a Satan worshiper, they'd, like in your word, they'd be a little crazy. So I'm just.
Are you saying that Bible verse is evidence of the fact that Putin and other world leaders are Satan worshipers?
I didn't say.
I would take a different approach. I would say Satan has to get his power from God, and so you could interpret it that way. There's an element of sovereignty at play. So I think in what we see in the biblical accounts, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar or Cyrus, or even just Hebrew leaders, that their decisions, independent of what they do, King Saul is another example, that there's something guiding their decisions, regardless of even at a heart level, if they're doing the right thing or not. So it could very well be that these national leaders are trying to do things the right way based on the information that they're given at any given time. Of course, there's other factors they have to consider. How do I take care of my people? I have not only Christians, but atheists and Buddhists and all these different people. Donald Trump, same thing, right? Okay, you might have what you personally believe at a heart level, but there's something that's superimposing that. There's a higher authority, and this is where we get into the whole like, okay, is there a natural law? Is there a natural lawgiver? Are some destined for destruction and others destined for eternity? And that's where I think the issue comes into play is, well, Christian people can decide that for themselves because they can interpret the Bible and make it look like everything's okay for those that believe, but for everyone else, nope, sorry, you're going to hell. Right. And I would just say that what seems to make the most sense is that if there was a fall, if the fall was an actual event, that explains why we have issues of injustice. That explains why we can't reconcile our problems with our neighbors, why we have borders to begin with. It's because we had an harmonious ideal state, and then we haven't had it. And the human heart hasn't changed since. So what explains that and what holds it all together?
So to pull this all back for me, because now
It's
you
a lot.
have me like a little interested. So either there is something pulling the strings behind the scenes that we can't.
Real quick, I'm going to try to call in while you're talking. So just if there's,
We're going to get some call-ins too. So
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and call screener line.
I couldn't figure it out
Please enter your show or meeting number and press pound.
Oh my goodness,
happens
Dan, I
all
still
the
remember
time.
my old number when I was a call
Invalid
screener.
number.
That just brought it all back
Please
to
enter
me.
your show or meeting
Call-in
number.
studio, baby.
Followed by
I am.
What do you guys use for the call-in? I'm sorry to interrupt.
We use Call-in Studio.
number.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't.
I use my Discord, so that's not.
Yeah.
That was
Puck,
Yeah.
you're trying to get presuppositional, man. I feel you.
No. I was just saying, like, how can we tell, like, how would we tell the difference between something that is being, manipulated and something that is not? Like, is everything manipulated? Like,
sorry, that is not a
like the
valid-
only way that I can
Good
think
question.
of to tell
NCC.
is to compare it to something
Goodbye.
that we know is and something that we know is not. But I don't know how to do that. So what do you propose for a way to determine if something is being manipulated or is not being manipulated?
Right. We need a standard that is consistent and reliable, that addresses core categories of truth and reality. So like, and here's the thing is, it can't be derived by us because we're limited in our understanding and perception of reality. There's cognitive, dissonance, there's bias, there's so many different things at place here. And the reality is that we have to also question at deep level where we came from. Did we derive this intelligence? Or was it evolved, right? That's where the conversation of evolutionary theory comes into play. And, did we just mutate and eventually gain this knowledge? Is there hierarchies of knowledge, or was this imprinted by our creator and designer? And therefore we have the ability to, we have the ability to understand and reason our way to a standard of truth. And if that standard is embodied in the person of Jesus Christ, then we can just examine how Jesus Christ lived, what he'd done, the morals and precepts of which he had stood by, and then we can assess and evaluate based on that standard whether or not we're actually conforming to the laws.
But even then, it's going to be based on our assessment of it. So even if it did come from a divine source, the second it touches humanity, it's instantly tainted. So I got to pull it back to the original question. How do we know what is and what isn't being spiritually manipulated? Like, if there's no way for us to figure that out, I don't know, there's no way for us to figure it out. But if there's no way for us to really figure it out, then why are we putting anything on that foundation?
A couple of reasons why.
And you talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is important because it's one thing to say, well, because, and I'll frame it like this: if I was to view, like, let's say I'm just right there listening to Jesus, in person. And I'm like, hey, this guy's got a lot of intelligence, and he's making some pretty, insightful comments and wisdom and parables and stuff. Okay, I get that. But what he's saying, the language he's saying, is says, hey, I came from the Father in heaven. I'm coming from outside this dimension, and I can demonstrate that a few different ways. And I would say, if you guys haven't heard this before, this is something to look into. You can go to the website, forcampus.org. I have an article about prophecy. If you want to know why I believe or why I have confidence in who God says he is, it's because what he had said in one period of time, a long time ago, has come to pass with remarkable accuracy, whether it's the birth of a nation, the messianic figure entering into the world, how he lives and dies, major movements of people, and even current events today. Talking about Russia, right? Gog and Magog, right? There's prophecies, Ezekiel 38, 39, Revelations 20. And I know some of those are up to different interpretations. But
I mean, George Bush said Gog and Magog was, Iran and Iraq.
He's not. I would question his exegetical and hermeneutical, undertakings.
I would also, probably for different reasons than you, Jason. I would also question his exegetical and hermeneutical interpretations of the word. But I'll be honest, I'm never impressed when a Christian tells me, "Oh, everything we're seeing in the world today was predicted in the Bible," because if that was honestly true, the Christians will be telling us about Russia doing all this shit. And what we're seeing ad hoc rationalizations, I think personally, of look, here's some stuff that could vaguely put, look, this is a verse talking about how great nations are going to go to war. Wow. Russia's going to war. I mean, it's the most, every televangelist in the world has done this.
I'm totally in agreement, Dan. I don't like personally ascribing dates and times, but there are some things that are self-evident. The nation of Israel wasn't even a reality until about half a century ago. And the way that they had secured that land was, it was pretty miraculous. I went there a few years ago, and I've served in the middle.
Was it? Whoa! It was miraculous.
Yeah.
Whoa!
The way that
whoa! Jason.
Oh yeah. Hey, look, this miracle's an atheist, baby. Look.
That's I know, I get that, but that came as a result of the Holocaust.
No, I'm talking about how they actually went in. Having superior militaries. I went to Israel a couple of years ago. Our tour guide had served on the front lines in the Yom Kippur War.
Hold on a second. I want to ask a clarifying question. Then, if it was,
this conversation is going to veer far off. So
if we clarify about what Dan said. So if it wasn't miraculous, Dan, then what would a miraculous reestablishment of Israel?
That's a better question.
What would a miraculous establishment of Israel look like?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what that would be. I don't know what it means to have a miraculous start of a nation. I think it's interesting that you would choose Israel of all nations, because Israel was specifically founded after the atrocities of what's happened in the Holocaust and in World War II, so that the Jewish people could have their own nation. And that, as a result as well, led to the apartheid of the Palestinian people, which still happens today and is still going on and is still a great conflict. You just have to look up footage of the Gaza Strip and the missiles that get sent out there every month. I don't think that's a miracle, having missiles blow up in your own country because you have disagreements with people over land disputes that are still happening however many decades later. I don't know if it fits the qualifications. But then again,
so to compare it, can you give us an example of a mundane creation of a nation?
That's
absolutely not spiritually affected.
How is it that the United States?
So are you saying that the formation let's get this clear first of all. The formation of the United States had absolutely zero spiritual influence. Is that what you're saying?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No,
so can you give me an example of a nation that formed absent completely of spiritual intervention, so that we can compare it, so we can say this is what it's like when it's not spiritually affected? So that's how we know this is
a good point. No, this is a good point. So we do want to make sure we stay on the conversation of Russia and Ukraine. So I'm not trying to backpedal here, but
at this point, I don't really care.
We got some more interesting topic, I think.
If I see something and I say, and I don't have in my worldview or in my belief, in my understanding, right, as a human being, as a sentient being, that there's something that could be supernatural or miraculous, something that outside of our dimension or our spatial reality could interpose in events before our very eyes, then my conclusion is going to lead me to the fact that there's not enough examples or comparisons I can make. I could tell you all day, hey, the way that the United States was founded relative to the nation, the size of Great Britain, the amount of influence it had, the fact that we were divided as a nation, different colonies with lots of ties. Is there something providential? Possibly. And I think a lot of the early framers had that in their worldview. You see that in language and, a number of the drafting documents. Now, some people today would argue, a lot of these guys were Masons and had ulterior agendas. And, Thomas Jefferson was out there rewriting them up. That's tangential. The vast majority of the nation was God-fearing. And another thing that's in like that is like such a deep dive we can go on just early US history. But to say what I'm saying in terms of supernatural is this, how it all ties in the conversation. There's something that's driving and motivating these nations and these leaders towards a desired outcome. And there seems to be a large amount of pressure and influence. We've seen this in the Middle East in the last decade. There's something converging, and it's happened obviously in the West, but now it seems to be focused on the Fertile Crescent, that region surrounding Israel, the nations around there. And one can say, oh, it's about oil, it's about territory, it's about expansion. Possibly. From a natural perspective, possibly. From a supernatural perspective, it's because it's a God-fearing nation, a democratic nation, and it represents the supremacy of God as sovereign. The Chinese, Saudis, other nations in that part of the world are fundamentally at odds with Israel. Why? And by the way, Israel feeds a lot of these nations. It supports technology.
So yeah, the weird thing is I can answer that with completely mundane answers, and I don't know where spiritual comes
but here's the thing: is why are they still there? That's another question to ask. How are these people
What do you mean by why are they still there?
How is the nation of Israel still alive?
Because America has nukes, and it's an ally with Israel, and it has been one of the closest allies that the United States has in the Middle East.
Which explains why Russia would probably want, or other nations would probably want to get rid of, or at least tamper with the relations between us and Israel.
Yes.
I mean, like from a political standpoint, we're in agreement. But from a supernatural standpoint, I see that the scripture does align with what we're seeing in current events. Now, at a micro level, it's tricky. But on a macro level, absolutely. And then in the last century's demonstrated that.
That's the problem. So you could have found this anywhere. Like if they had StreamYard 200 years ago, there would have been 2 people on your side and 2 people on my side saying, obviously, the events that are going on in the world today lead to these, it leads me to be able to rationally draw this conclusion. And there was no Israel back then. So what gets to me is that even if something was right, there's still no, like I can predict if I was able to correctly predict the scores of every ice hockey game tonight, still doesn't tell you how. Right? It doesn't say if I was spiritually motivated or just darn lucky that the Kraken won 6-0. Okay.
I mean,
how do you, and then we still got to get back to that. How can you tell, like you say in my worldview, it's possible. Okay. In your worldview, is everything spiritual? And this is, I mean this, and I don't know. So I have to ask, is everything spiritually affected? And if so, how can we determine that from, like, what would it look like if it was not? Do we have anything in this reality that you believe is not spiritually affected?
Are you going like predestination, Calvinist type?
No, I'm just asking. Like you were talking about, like there was a spiritual something going on that's causing these nations to do their thing. That's what I'm wondering. So, like when you say that, can you give me something to compare it to any sort of interaction between nations that had no spiritual motivation, so we can point to the differences between?
Yeah, you want like a standard. You want a standard.
It doesn't even have to be standard. I don't need a standard. I need something that's relative. Okay.
Here's my counterpoint. Yeah, my counterpoint. I would just say like this. I can't give you a standard because in order for you to approach that, you would have to be approaching that from a supernatural perspective as well as a natural perspective. So I gave you an example of like the U.S., the formation of the United States as a natural perspective. It seems very peculiar and somewhat extraordinary how the nation was founded, how it's been able to survive for the past couple of hundred years through multiple wars. And by the way, the population of the nation, I mean, there's multiple times we could have been completely taken over by the British if we lost key victories. I mean, if we had supplies, if we got the money from certain nations. So is it providential? Is it peculiar? Possibly. But what I view it as is that there's something supernatural at place because not just my testimony, people that have been through, I mean, certain events and conflicts that said, hey, I mean, even in Israel, that small band of military of loosely fitted units had overwhelmed by other nations that wanted to prevent them from going in and getting their country or establishing their country. And there were people on the ground that reported seeing angels covering armies. and entire platoons of foreign enemy soldiers unable to fire on them. I mean, now that's, like I said, let's just take it even deeper at a heart level.
Hold on, let me let them respond, because you asked a question about is everything spiritually motivated from the Christian worldview? Is that
Well,
that's a good question.
In your worldview, is literally everything spiritually motivated? Because if so, then we have no baseline for comparison. So I'm just curious, what do you think the United States formation would have been like if it was not spiritually motivated? If there was no spiritual intervention whatsoever, what would it look like? What would it have been?
We wouldn't have the laws that we have and the framework for the freedoms that we have today, the history behind that, the fact that we have, I would say not the most amount of freedom, but I would say that the standards, the values, the ethics, the virtues, I would say the Constitution and how it's framed, including the rights, the inalienable rights that we enjoy today, those are all imprinted from Judeo-Christian ideology and theology. That's
Jason,
undeniable.
But I want to answer your question more directly, Alex, because you're just saying, okay, from a Christian worldview, is everything spiritually motivated or not? It's kind of like a yes or no question. Is that where you're going?
I'm just curious. I don't know much about your worldview, so I'm curious. Is there anything that happens in your worldview that is completely absent of spiritual motivation?
I would say no, and this is why, because biblically we'd hold that to that's our worldview. It comes out of the scriptures, is that it's either of God or it's of the enemy. There's either good or there's natural laws that take place that we believe that God created, and like certain things happen, but the motivation behind why somebody does, they're either of the spirit or they're not. And so it's disguised in many different ways. Things happen that aren't, things happen that aren't like directly correlated. You can't in your mind say, oh, because I did this, or because you don't consciously think about it, you just do it. And it's just, there's something behind it. In our worldview, there's something behind pushing that forward.
Okay.
I have a different answer to that.
What do you mean? What do you mean when you say there's no basis for comparison? Because the way I interpret that is, okay, well, if you're going to put supernatural into it, then there's no even reason to have a discussion, because we don't hold anything like super. I think what's his name? Eric, not Murphy.
Eric Murphy.
No. The other Eric that I had on a while back, he said that the supernatural would be the last thing we look at. Are you going there?
No, I'm not necessarily going there, because in Puckville, where I spend a considerable amount of my time, I'm not saying that the supernatural doesn't exist. I'm just saying that unless I can firmly connect something to this is what caused it, I have no reason to say that it did or didn't. So in a purely in a worldview that includes a supernatural such as yours, and I genuinely don't know, so this is please genuinely asking, is there anything that happens in your worldview that is not spiritually motivated? And I'm talking about the littlest thing, from like you're playing a game of poker, and the cards that you get in a game of poker, are those spiritually motivated?
No.
The contents of this coffee mug, whatever I decided to drink earlier today, which is now I forgot to wash it, so it's all dried up, was that spiritually motivated?
No.
So okay, so now that we know there are some things that are not spiritually motivated.
Do you disagree with that, Jay? Because I would say there's.
I'm going to say I think I understand where the line is. The differences between what we believe in our worldview is that there's the natural realm, the material, spatial reality that we coexist in, right? Mm-hmm. And then above that is the heavenly realm, or what we would say is in the area of the supernatural, the spirit realm. And that's where there's angels and demons. That's where there's space for phenomena. There's space for prophecy. There's space for things that can actually interact with our physical dimension. And by the way, the people on the other end of that extreme are the ones that believe in aliens, the ones that also factor into their worldview that they're spirits and all that. How that's interpreted biblically, there's not enough time under the sun. But I would say this is Romans 8:5. And this is important because there's the flesh and the spirit. The flesh is actually how we understand our natural senses, how we can actually observe things in reality to a certain degree. Those who live according to the flesh, their minds have their their minds are set on what the flesh desires: food, drink, sex, all that. Right? No one's disagreeing with that.
I don't think flesh is not like inherently bad in our worldview, right? It's just that it is what it is. Right.
But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their mind set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. And there's Paul talks a lot about this in Romans, and like the key is this: is that most of our interactions on a day-to-day basis, we're thinking about our immediate needs, our hunger, our desires, our passions. The same problems that, hey, look, we all rest our head on the pillow at night and we dream and we wonder and we create, we try to make sense of everything. What the Bible does is the Bible essentially, the Word of God essentially tries to open up, I don't say open up our minds, but essentially tries to explain that above our natural perceivable understanding of reality, there's a supernatural reality where God exists outside of time and space and therefore can interact with his creation. Now, some believe that God already created all from the end of the beginning, and therefore nothing's a surprise to God. Where you're at on that, it's not the point. The point is that is how God can actually make the claims that he does. That I am the beginning and the end. That's how he can enter into our reality, and he can make prophecy. I can say something in this period of time, and it can reverberate through every epoch of time. That way, on this exact moment or this exact day, like the birth of a Messiah, like the movements of people from Egypt to Canaan.
Before you pivot, let them respond, please.
I was going to say, what do you think my next question is going to be?
Yeah,
what do you think my question is going to be?
How do you demonstrate that? Right?
No. I'm going to say that, even assuming, like, I'll grant you that there is such a realm. How do we pinpoint which interactions that affected and how that realm affected this realm? How do we know which was which?
I'm going to be one of the best. I'm going to be one of your favorite Christian friends right now. I don't know, and I don't think that we're supposed to know.
Then if we don't know, then how are we building on that foundation?
Well, there's
a lot that I don't know. Like, I don't know the roots of the Riemann hypothesis, so therefore I don't build on top of it. It's there and it's interesting. Blockchain is there and it's interesting, but not to the point where I'm going to build a currency system off of it. So likewise, it's there and it's interesting, but if it can't act in a predictable way, why am I building anything off of it?
Well, wouldn't you just build it off of what's written if you believe that Scripture is the Word of God? Wouldn't you just build off of that? What do you mean?
Because I guess let's start with that. I have no reason to believe that if there was such a God, that it affected the exact documents that you were talking about in the way that you were saying it did. Like you were saying, well, Paul said this. Okay, well, even if Paul said that, how do we know Paul is correct? Here's where I come from, and I think I'm saying this to Dan for the first time, so he's going to be shocked by this also. Okay, if it's true, it is true not just because it's in the Bible. It would be true regardless of whether the Bible existed or not.
That's a good point.
There's nothing that is true because it's written in the Bible.
You're right.
Truth has to be.
I agree with that.
Okay, so we can just take the whole Bible and just throw it out the window and say, okay, let's figure it out from.
But that's the case.
Else.
Is how do we know if anything's true? How do we know Julius Caesar was a real person?
It really doesn't affect me whether Julius Caesar was a real person or not. People ask me that. Like, what would happen? Like, the works of Aristotle were not actually written by Aristotle. Okay, so what? I mean, like on my day, like this was written. Okay, sure, it's here on paper. It doesn't matter.
Here's the problem, Puck, is that you're basically making a judgment on whether something is important or real or substantial based on how you feel.
No. I don't think you're saying that at all.
I am basing it on what I can.
It is okay.
I'm basing it on what I can build off of it. Yeah. If I can't build anything off of it because it's not. If I can build off it, it's of practically no value to me.
What does that mean?
I suppose my closest philosophical position would be pragmatism, where it's only as important as it is useful. But Dan, go ahead, take it.
Well, I think what it means is if I said Pikachu is number 28 in the Pokedex, that may or may not be true. But that really doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Like that's ultimately arbitrary anyway, right?
Yeah.
Julius Caesar, again, like we can point to historical records about what he did and didn't do, and that will inform our historical perspective, and historical perspectives inform how we make decisions going forward. The level of importance is a little bit higher. Jesus Christ rising from the dead. Oh, now that's big on the level of importance, right? Because, well, at least for us in the Christian, where we view Christianity as eternity is at stake. From the Christian point of view, that's a big deal, right? So like that's why, Puck and I and other people and yourself and others are going to be more informed about Christian issues rather than whatever the fuck the Pokedex says, because that's That's what we're saying. We're not saying, oh, one's more important because it's how we feel. It's literally just how it affects us. Right.
So this is a good point, though. This is a good point. If we don't have a standard of morality and a standard of objective reality, a standard of truth and criteria of, I mean, even if you want to go the epistemological route, if we don't know what actual categories of truth and reality are, and this is a good point, this is why we need to come to the table with our presuppositions, is because now when the conversation comes up on a matter of, well, what is good? How do we define good and bad and right and wrong? What if this person wants to be one gender or the other, and we need to have rules and criteria to protect the lives of many people? I mean, and that sounds like more of an extreme case, but if we don't have categories of truth and we don't have a standard that we can appeal to, when we're coexisting together, there's points of overlap where there's contention.
There
and
is.
How do we rectify those?
Well, you have to follow one of the 6 C's. You can either coerce, compromise, cooperate, appeal to a common authority. You can compel, or you can do a number of things. But one of the things that's not on there, you notice, is being correct. And that's because even if you were right, you still need to go through one of those other steps to get other people to go along with it. The weird thing about being right is that most of the time it doesn't matter. So first of all, you can't. First of all, it doesn't matter, and second of all, how can you even demonstrate other than saying, "Well, I've got this book"?
You're 100% right. People don't know how much you know until they know how much you care. And people aren't going to be won over to your truth unless they see that you demonstrate your truth and what you believe. And that is why when I look at the person of Jesus, and this is just me, it's not that I look at him and say, hey, that's a great example of morality. I'm so glad we have that now. That makes me sleep. No, it's because when I started to seek God through his word, he met me in a supernatural way, not so that, oh, wow, I have peace now and I can live the rest of my lives and just, I am so happy I have this relationship. I am. But it's actually so that I can understand why I'm created, what I'm created for. It's to bless you. It's to be a friend to you, a neighbor to you, to live with you. Go ahead.
Just a second. What do you mean he met you in a supernatural way?
Now we're talking, Dan. All right. So you actually had a guest. Nick interviewed you last with a man named, was it John Navarro?
Joe Navarro.
Joe Navarro, yeah. I had a very similar testimony with him.
You know how it's been that long.
I'll tell you the differences between me and him when I listened to your guys' interview. I was actually more like you, Dan. I wanted to lead Christian people away from that truth because I didn't experience that myself. I grew up.
Hold on, you're making your assumption there. Do you want to lead people away from Christianity, Dan? Because I don't want to.
I want people to be convinced of true things, and I want people to understand. I think there are better ways of figuring out how to figure out truths than others. And so I will incorporate it and teach others how you.
He's a more righteous man than me because I was trying to actually lead people away from it. I thought it was totally wrong, and I mean, I grew up in the faith.
I do think I do think many forms of Christianity are ultimately harmful. Yeah. So like I will oppose Christian despots like Christian nationalists and stuff. Like I'll actively call that out. But the difference is, it's somebody who's getting paid on a platform to speak out these kinds of things is much different from my experience, which was just a guy who grew up in a Christian, household, and 99% of the people I talk to are just that, So
hey, look, I mean, and I've been that guy too, to get heavy on the rhetoric and all that. But the reason why I had my whole testimony is I started going back to church to get right in my heart, and the last person I thought I'd meet was Jesus Christ. I mean, having an experiential supernatural encounter with the living God, it's not something I can put into words, but if I could explain it, and by the way, look, shameless plug, I just finished a book. I'll post a note if you guys want to look at that. I talk about a little bit about, the reason why I mention this though, is because I'm not saying this because it's what I just personally feel. No, it's what I've encountered and what I believe. The hard part now is actually explaining to people that haven't encountered that, using human language, using the systems of logic and reality and just the same faculties that were imprinted to us.
And you're asking what a supernatural experience is. That's what you're asking?
I mean, well, because look, right? Let's be honest. Christians are not unique in their claims to supernatural experiences to validate their worldview. Right. That goes beyond. That's older than Judaism. That's
biblical too, Dan. Right. When the staff got turned into a serpent, and the other staff got turned into a serpent, and the one ate the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that actually happened, but yeah, I mean, the narrative is there. Yeah,
right.
So it's like, look, so do you think that your spiritual experience is somehow more valid than other people's spiritual experience? Like, how does that uniquely confirm your worldview as opposed to anybody else's?
Yeah, I like that.
It's a great point. It's because my encounter with Christ was that.
Is my mic working?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Jason's just excited, Nick. He just
I know, man. I'm all over the place. I love to talk about this
I have
stuff.
the ability to turn things up and down, but I'm such a rookie. I can't even speak over my own co-host. So, Dan, can I answer that question?
Of course. I mean, it's your show. You do what the hell you want. Sorry, I keep cussing on this show, and I understand this is a Christian show, and I'm blaspheming it with my naughty words, and I do
a lot of grace, and we've had plenty of atheists come on and cuss at us, so that's not us, but just whatever. Not forgot your question. You said, because of supernatural experiences, does our worldview trump another worldview just because we have a supernatural experience and somebody else does?
From what I understand what Jason just told me, right? He said that his supernatural experience was integral to his life, to how he says he's telling me it's hard for him to convince me because I don't have that same experience. And I would say I agree. It's hard for me to be convinced if I don't share that experience. So I am asking about the legitimacy, like how do we determine, because everybody has experiences, right? Like whether it's supernatural or not, like there's record of people saying I've had an experience. So like how do we, what's our discernment here?
All right. So one thing I think Christians get wrong a lot of times is that we don't recognize the spiritual aspect of the human experience, right? I mean, I already indicated that either comes from one or other place. That's what my worldview is, but absolutely, you get into transcendental meditation. You go to another place, you go outside your body. There's been cases that people are not Christian. They float outside of their apartment. They go to the other apartment. They see pizza boxes laying around and stuff like that and all kinds of craziness. Never been in the apartment before. They go knock on the door and they actually see the pizza boxes and stuff they saw when they're outside their body. So there's cases for non-Christian spiritual cases. When you get into Wicca and Wiccan and some of the different practices there where Christians will call witchcraft and sorcery and stuff like that, those are real. They're real, but Christians don't necessarily recognize it because you probably the evangelicals kind of stray away from that stuff because we've been trained to stray away from that kind of stuff. But absolutely, it's real. So does supernatural experiences validate whether Christianity is true? I would say that Christianity overall provides explanations for those other supernatural experiences. So one doesn't validate the other.
I would actually, so in some respect, I would agree with you, right? Within the Christian worldview, if you would do account for a spiritual, supernatural rather, that isn't within the kingdom of God, right? Is within the devil's domain, or however you want to phrase that, then there might be an explanation within the Christian worldview. Right. But again, I would posit that those things can also be explained. All spiritual experiences can be explained by even a more perfunctory explanations.
And we're not denying that. I would agree that
kind of I mean, one thing I like about your guys' platforms is that you use really big vocabulary, and I want to know what those words mean. But I do like the fact that you use them, because what I typically do is I look them up and then I feel like I've learned something. So perfunctory means what?
Well, so maybe a better way is parsimonious.
Oh my!
Okay.
No, now you're just showing off, Dan.
All right. So there is a concept
in Greek.
Familiar.
Dan.
Okay. So I got to speak in Hebrew and Greek if I'm talking to theologians, right? That's the thing. Okay. So I'll keep it very simple. Here's a very quick atheist stereotype, right? Occam's razor. I know you're familiar with this concept, right? So if you've studied basic philosophy, I mean, it's out there, right? The simplest explanations tend to be the most true, right? So we unless and that's not always true. Obviously there's exceptions to this rule. It is a shortcut, a heuristic. It is not a be all end all case for every single explanation. So we have to prove against this rule, really, if we're talking about people's explanations of the supernatural. And maybe there is a complex spiritual warfare that's been happening all this time that I'm just not privy to, which I believe is the worldview of Christians, who do say, there's these things happening from both good and dark forces that are manipulating things, right? Or people are misinterpreting the world around them because we're fallible and we're humans, right? So like, how do we test against this more, again, parsimonious explanation? I would argue, which is that human beings are fallible and human beings just get stuff wrong and are just historical. Because sorry, let me add this too, just so you know a bit more about me. I describe myself in the latter years of my Christianity as a Christian mystic. I was very much influenced by podcasts like I can't even remember the name now. Just more liberal Christian podcasts who are much more open to using labels like that for themselves, because I actually wasn't convinced that the Bible, at least in a historical capacity, was very good at describing events accurately as they claim to be. I just think that my experiences through God were personal, and that was the best. That's how I lived my faith. That's
right.
how I understood that. Yeah. Right. So anyway, that's an extra thing to say. You know, how do we? I eventually said, actually, this is a better explanation, which is, you know, I was wrong about my spiritual experiences. That it was actually, it can be explained through secular means, even if I can't completely explain the minutia. So like,
what's your question?
That's my long question that I've now gotten to is.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, yeah, I
it helps explain things. It does.
Having a platform, right? It's like, look, I understand a spiritual interpretation of events because that was an interpretation I've held of my own events, but I've since been able to supplant that with a completely secular one that seems to be have much greater explanatory power.
I want to know your question, Dan, and then I want to hear what that experience was that you justified in your Christian worldview in the past, and that now you have a secular explanation for. But what was your question, though?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not doing very good on the question front. But the question really is, how do we have two worldviews? We have one that says complex spiritual warfare and phenomena are happening, and another one that's saying people are just fallible and people make mistakes and misinterpret the world.
Okay.
Which one's true? How do we figure that out between the two options?
I think there's some overlap actually with both of those, because while we may still have supernatural encounter or the Holy Spirit, which is our third person of the Trinity in us and around us, we still operate in the time and space that we're in. I mean, technically, I'm only existing in the present. While I may believe the past and the future have already been determined for me, I can only still make conscious decisions at any given moment. The difference is, though, when I pray, when I meditate on the word, when I'm in what you'd call a trance, when I'm in a spiritual place with God, it becomes less about me trying to figure out all the deep probing questions and understanding, all that, and more about just me connecting with my Creator. Mm-hmm. And some people do get insight. We call them words of knowledge or prophetic insight. And I've had people speak those things, and I'm not joking when I tell you some of those were very accurate. But can I put that on a spectrum and analyze it and run, some type of theorem on it and calculate out what that looks like? I would say examine the fruit of my life, compare it to the Bible, and make those judgments where you want. What I think, though, and this is key, if you guys really desire to know if God is real and if the Bible is true, and here's really the only key requirement, I think, you have to actually approach it believing that it's truth, and that shouldn't actually make you feel intellectually self-limiting. Like I'm gonna have to suspend all of my rational beliefs and my credentials and my standing. Screw that. If there's truth there, if you're truly on a search for truth, Dan, if you want and I think this is the better case. Don't search for the existential encounter. Search for truth. Use your criteria. Approach the Bible as an historical document. Examine the Gospels. Examine it as a historical piece of evidence, and use that same criteria. Is it logically consistent? Is it empirically adequate? Are the reports substantiated? What's the material and physical evidence? Let me look at the testimony, and let me actually engage with myself. If God is a person and Jesus Christ is the embodiment of God, and the Spirit is available and accessible to you, just engage with God and ask him and bring your criteria before him. And here's the thing is, the word says, if you seek me, you will find me if you seek with me with your whole heart. When I was a young man, I sought him, but I didn't seek within my heart because I had too many fleshly struggles. When I was older, I did. And it still took 2 years to have my first encounter with him. He doesn't have to tell us how he does things.
Go get it, Dan.
So, did you say, please correct me if I'm wrong, but did you say you have to approach the Bible believing that it's true?
If you approach the Bible believing that there's truth, and you take your criteria, the way that you want to examine it, whether it's, the logic test, the historical reliability test, the textual criticism methods that you want to apply, if they're sound, the hermeneutical and exegetical studies, I am almost confident. I mean, I'm not confident. You will find God.
I think, do you approach other texts the same way? Do you approach the Quran and saying, do you start by saying there's truth in this? Do you approach like Nazi propaganda and say, well, if you approach this with truth and if you use, then you're going to find, do you think this is something you can use everywhere?
What's interesting, and that's a good point. What's interesting is if you actually trace the root of every piece of literature is going to trace itself back in some way, shape, or form to the Bible.
Jason.
Give me another comparative literature. You want to go?
Sorry, I can't let you say that. I can't. There's Jason. That is
rebuff it.
I will rebuff it quite strongly. There's documents older than the Bible.
Sure,
the Bible's not, then the books in the Bible are not the first pieces of literature written. There's literature written before that.
Okay, if you're going
and then you have to remember how Western centric we are, where we have this very limited sphere here of all the knowledge that has existed in the world. And
let's go remember let's focus back on your question. Focus back on your question.
Yeah, I am. I promise you, I'm coming to it. We are the result of certain circumstances happening in the past where people won certain wars, and those people who won certain wars like to spread their ideology. Christianity was spread mostly because people went all over the world and spread it and did their thing. So I believe that we're just a product of that. Okay, so to say that everything that we know in our society is based on that doesn't say anything about society as a whole. It just tells us about what our particular little bubble can be traced back to. But that doesn't say anything about the entire ocean of philosophy, of literature, of art, of anything. And I think it would be a huge disservice to try to put everything back to that source instead of seeing where everything actually is and where it came from. Because what we're doing now is we're erasing a lot of culture. By saying we're going to take it out of the Bible, we're erasing a lot of culture.
I get the argumentation, and let me rephrase it like this. Does any of those religions or worldviews or pieces of literature make the claims that the Bible does? And I'm talking about
what is that?
Yeah, just because it makes a claim, this is where one of the biggest gripes we have. Just because it makes a claim doesn't mean the claim is true. Just because there is an accounting for something in your worldview doesn't mean that the accounting is correct.
Well, even
an accounting for the foundation of morality, but we don't know if that is accurate.
I don't even say. I was going to say something else.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which was that. So the Bible makes unique claims. Okay, so what is that? How does that relate to its truthiness? I've read some very unique claims from people. I just talked to a guy last week that didn't believe in space. That's pretty unique, but that doesn't make it true.
And the Earth is flat, and Bigfoot and Sasquatch. So if we're just talking about a stone with a story, Gilgamesh, anything like that, if we're just talking about an independent find with a limited amount of records in history, no matter how old it is, we find tons of records from Old Testament, New Testament, and we're not just hearing about all their good victories. We're hearing about the good kings and bad kings, the moral failings of the people. You don't see this type of language and content in any other religion. You see about all the victories they have. You see about all the good stories they have.
That's not an indication of whether it's
true. What I'm saying is it lends to its credibility as a document that can be examined. Because the Bible presents itself, especially New Testament, will present itself like, hey, these things actually happen. These are people that you can go to today and you can interview.
Jason, so so I'm just going to take this down.
What do you think we're going to say about the 500, Jason?
Also, I would say the Bible's influenced by other older sources.
We're not talking about what I'm saying is that give it an honest read.
Jason, I have.
We're going to give it a skeptical read, just like we would
a
want to read
historical
everything.
document.
I'm not going to
as a supernatural piece of literature.
What you're saying here about how does I'm trying to as the host of this show, I'm trying to get us regrouping.
And Nick, if by the way, if you want to, normally guys, we do like an altar call. We'll probably spare you that.
Can I respond? Lose my. We're all over the place here.
Yeah, we are.
Look, I'm just respond with anecdotal answer to what you're saying, because it's impossible to answer your question anyway. How do you know it's true or anything? I would say that if we have a God that's real and that who does love us and wants us to ascribe to his ways, and he cares about us, then we're going to know about him. So if there's all these, if there's little text that you're comparing the biblical Christian worldview to some other religion at the top of a mountain and some tribe somewhere that nobody knows, then that's the actual real truth. We don't know about that. So God would make himself known in some way. And then so there's the big buckets of, you got Islam, you get the big ones, right? Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and then there's sort of subsets to those in my opinion. But then you have a starting point now to say, okay, well, you put Christianity at the same level as Islam. If you want to take it seriously, and kind of like Jason was saying, and I guess sort of to go along with what you're saying, Dan, do you look at it as if you want to start as if it's true, versus typically the atheist? What I've heard from my past guests is that how do you falsify? How do you prove this is falsifiable? Or how is this falsifiable? Is a statement that I heard a lot about. So you would do that for both faiths that make these claims and go to the foundation, the root of Islam and how they developed and everything, and then compare that to the Christian worldview. And I don't think the other ones stand up to the Christian worldview. So if God is real and he wants his people to know him, he's going to make himself known in some way, shape, or form.
Interesting. So what about all of the world outside of like Israel circa 2,000 years ago?
The same pantheon is repackaged itself through the Egyptian pantheon of gods, through the Greco-Roman pantheon.
But that's just the Middle East.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Native Americans, both North and South, Aborigines, Asian peoples. I mean, most of the world was not Christian for the majority of. I don't even know. Actually, I don't know.
So how do we know?
Well, yeah, I can take it from here, Dan. Do you mind if I took it?
Well, I think I asked my question.
Okay, never mind. Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing is that here's the thing is Jesus doesn't give us any other way. He says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. How do you reconcile that? No one, who else makes those claims and demonstrates that?
Yeah. Well, how did the Aborigines come to know Jesus before Western?
So you're talking about salvation? Are you talking about like salvation?
No. Well, Nick said. Well, wait, I just want to clarify because Nick said that a loving God would want his people to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I actually agree with that. So how did the Aborigine people know of Christianity?
Couple ways. One, you have redemptive analogies. So people in their mythos have linkages back to God. And at one point, you had the Tower of Babel. Every nation, tribe, and tongue were united in the fact that they knew that God was alive and that God existed, and he spoke to people.
Did they know Jesus?
Well, that's a good point.
You said they have to know Jesus. He's the truth of the way.
Jesus is God. And so for people that were pre-existent to Jesus, God judged that at a heart level if they were obedient to God through the law.
I'm not even talking about I'm just talking about like contemporary to Jesus.
Right.
Like, so current, like,
go ahead, Puck.
Like one of the biggest, like this is what did me in. You want to talk about the final nail. This is what did me in for me. That what we never find is spontaneous generation of Christian doctrine in a place that's never discovered it. Literally everybody who's come to Christianity has done so in a traceable way. If this was really the truth, it would be a discoverable truth that doesn't need to be passed in the way that you're prescribing, just the way a lot of scientific discoveries were discovered by people all in different parts of the world. They all discovered astronomy and they all came to the same conclusions with absolutely no collusion or collaboration. Religion doesn't spread that way.
I don't know if
you can trace religious influence from.
Is your
from
question
place to
though
place.
whether or not those people have the ability to know God, or whether
No.
God
My
them to
question
know
is
it?
deeper than that. If God really wanted us to get to know Him,
Right.
why is it that you can get two people in different parts of the world and they're going to give you very different answers? So either this is not a reasonably good receptacle that we have, or God is not really a very good sender. So
would they know if they had no, for what your words, collusion, right? Would they know God? I think I'm not sure I agree with your statement that you can never not trace it back to influence from there's plenty of testimonies where tribal leaders who never interact with the other cultures have had.
Let's see them, and I hear people say that there are stories like that. I've never been actually presented with a case. I would love to be. Prove me wrong. Show me anywhere with a spontaneous generation of pure Christian doctrine that was not taught. That
I'm not
divine.
general God beliefs is not the same thing as Christianity, by the way. I just heard you guys make the case that Christianity is unique in its God claims, and that's how we know it's true.
Why just the spontaneous? And what about the stillborn child?
Because there's actually a reason for this. Because if something is true, we agreed on this. It doesn't necessarily need to come from one place. You can discover it through wherever, right? And so, if God really did want to get to know His people and spread His word that Jesus said, cool. But then other people would have been able to get that message intact, even if they did not hear it from another person.
Yeah.
So how did that? Where has this ever happened? Show me anywhere where true Christian doctrine has ever arisen without being taught by another person.
I would say this. I don't know why that's the final nail in the coffin for you.
Well, can I respond?
Because it spreads like a philosophy instead of spreads like a discovery.
Okay.
It's not about discovering truth. It's about more share. It's the way that popular music spreads, or how art spreads.
You can't say at the same time, right, that all of these religions are so different and Christianity is so unique, and cite those same religions as the influence of God. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right? Like, if God inspired it, then something must have gone haywire somewhere, because everybody got a completely different impression of it.
Yeah.
And if we really wanted to get the right message across, if He was capable of doing that, you think He would have done a better job.
The issue is that you're trying to apply criteria to how God does things outside of His criteria. And so if you're making a judgment claim on how God works, and you're not you're basically saying,
no. Jason, you made the judgment claim on how God works. You said this is how we know it's legitimate.
But what I'm challenging to do is I'm actually challenging you to pursue Him for yourself. And those questions that you're asking. I mean, by the way, look, it's okay to be skeptical about how I perceive what God does. That's my perspective. And every theologian is going to make different interpretations on what the word says. I'm just challenging you to say, hey, those questions you have, I think you're going to find sufficiency in the Bible and in the person of the Bible in Christ. Now you're shaking your.
Wait.
I'm shaking my head, Jason, because
let's follow it, because you've already given the answer to what happens if we don't find an answer. You're going to say what? That we did not seek with a true enough or honest enough heart. Somehow it's our fault.
Yeah.
No, no, guys, look. Okay. Let's take a step back. All right. You've already settled in your mind and your heart.
Nope.
You've settled it, because if you're still seeking,
why the hell would I be here, Jason?
We have been spending the entire 2 years of our I've been on the internet sphere for 2 years. Dan's been on for longer. Right. Saying that we are honestly looking for an answer.
Yeah, I believe. Hey guys, I'm gonna tell you, I believe you, Jason. Hold on, before
read cover to cover.
I have, Jason. I have.
Yeah.
I have it here in Finnish right next to me.
I have the Bible app. How many atheists you don't have the Bible app? I mean, geez. I mean, like, look.
So what do you think we're not? Do you think we're not sincere? Do you genuinely? What do you think is deficient about us that we don't come to the same conclusions that you do? I'm actually.
Seriously. There's nothing deficient. There's nothing deficient. It's.
Did you think we don't seek honestly enough?
I would say this. You need to approach God, and I'm not saying this to you like what you guys are doing wrong. What I'm saying is the way that God responds.
But we want to know what we're doing wrong, though.
Yeah, what are we doing wrong? Where's my methodology screwing up?
Because clearly you've made a very personal statement about our lives, Jason. You've decided to judge our true and honest intentions as to whether or not we
use your words. I'm going to use your words.
No, Jason. You don't know me. Okay, first of all, you would
know me even less.
You don't know me, and yet you've somehow come to the determination that I haven't honestly sought this.
Hey.
And I think you've come to that determination because if I had, then I would have come to the same conclusion as you do. Whereas maybe the possibility arises that other people with honest intentions can come to different conclusions.
Dan, I believe you. And here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to use my own personal perception of what you guys are talking about. How did I get it wrong? How are you? What are you guys doing wrong? Is what the question is, because it's an important question. I do believe. Now, I haven't watched your stuff in a while, Dan, but I'm going to take in faith what you're saying, that you do truly want to desire and find truth, because your freaking podcast is called Truth Wanted, right? So
you know how I first became known on the internet, right, Nick? You know my story.
You were not a missionary, but you were doing Bibles.
I was a student leader at a Crew organization at a campus in San Antonio, where I had a 30-minute conversation as a Christian with Anthony Magdamasco.
Yes. Okay. So I got you. So let me here, Dan. Here's my story. I'm not sure if you know my story.
I actually don't. I'd be very happy to know.
I'll do it as quick as I can, but I'll hopefully paint a picture in my mind of what was I doing wrong, and give you some insight as to kind of how I look at things now differently than I used to. So I went same as you, United Methodist. I grew up United Methodist. It was something that we did. We just kind of never talked about spiritual things at the house. My dad just used to say kind of general statements like, "Hey, the big man upstairs is going to take care of us," whatever. And I didn't know what that meant. Really, I didn't really even think about it. It's just I lived my life as though I was everybody else in the world and did my thing. I had sort of a guilty conscience to go to Bible study sometime, or hang out with people or whatever like it was. But man, I went to 37 years of my life just kind of going through the motions, and I had an encounter with what I believe is who I believe is the one true God, and sort of put me in a position to see where the road I was headed on. I was deeply in sin and a lot of destruction in my life, and came to a very low point in my life. And I met somebody that was different than me. They called himself a Christian, and I got confused. I said, "This guy's a Christian." And the same question you asked to Joe, Dan, because I went back and looked at our interview. You said, "I want to have that supernatural encounter. How come I don't have those supernatural encounters?" I asked the same question, and to this guy that I met, I went to high school. He was kind of I don't know if a Christian should use this frame. I'll just say he was a jerk in high school, right? And now he's different. He's like acting different. And I went and visited him. So I was trying to get clients because I was doing productivity coaching. And I was like, well, let me just see if I want to interact myself with more positive people. So I went to this guy's business, and it was different, man. It felt different. He got his staff together. He prayed in conference rooms over things, and he was seeing miraculous stuff. And I'm like, this is just wild. I've never experienced anything, especially in the workplace. It's different. So I came home and I prayed, God, he's a Christian. I'm a Christian. What am I missing? And at that point, I thought I had a genuine, like thought I was really truly doing what I needed to do. I thought I was seeking, but I didn't. It wasn't adding up. Something was missing. And at that point, it took like a point of brokenness in my life. And I'm not saying everybody needs to get to a point of brokenness, but for me, it did. That what was separating me from God was the way I was living, was sin, missing the mark. And I said, wait, I'm not sinful. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a rapist, a murderer. I don't want pedophiles out there, because I was looking at how I was living, and I was comparing to everybody else. And I was going down the wrong path, and I had some stuff that was heavy. Like I'd pray probably like you used to pray, but I had some stuff that was like heavy on me, and it never like went away. And it was for 37 years. I was 37 years old when this happened, 40 something now. And, but it was that point of brokenness where I felt really, really compelled to do something with this sin and like confess it. And it wasn't just to God, because I did that hundreds of times. I don't know. I did actually think I might have prayed daily. I don't know. But I took this stuff to the person that was closest to me, and I could have lost everything. But I remembered like having this and saying, I know what you want me to do with this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust you that it's got to be better than where I'm at now. I'm going to trust you with that. And I didn't think too much about it. I just did it. for whatever compelling reason. And it was that point in my life where everything started to change, because before I had like this perception, this thing I should have done, but then there was this trust that I had nothing else. So I'm going to trust in you with everything. And I put it on the line. So like the faith thing to me made sense, because what does it mean to believe? Like, I believe that I'm on a podcast right now talking to you, but I didn't know, like, what does that mean? Like, I know I'm here, but like, what does it mean to believe that it's true? It doesn't believe that faith doesn't really amount to anything really, but just a concept, a non-graspable concept. That's not as good as the word you used, but you couldn't grasp it. So at that time, I realized that the faith thing was a trust thing, and I hadn't trusted, and I didn't know what it meant to trust something that I couldn't see. And it was that point in my life where I look back, like it was like 2 years later. Now I'm the annoying Christian that, like, I used to go to like bars and stuff, and I'd have these people approaching me, and I'd be like, why is that guy? There was like a guilt, like, why is he telling me about Jesus? Like, I'm a Christian. Stop bothering me. I was annoyed by it. And I looked at I was talking to my sister one day, and I was like, man, I'm telling her about Jesus, and I'm like, I'm the annoying Christian. Like, God, what happened? And at that time, this is like, call it supernatural, whatever. But at that time, I was brought back to that moment where, like, I trusted him for the first time. And I look back at my life at that time, not even knowing 2 years later that my life completely changed. And that was the crux of it. So now when I approach things, and I'll give you one tangible, because what does a supernatural experience look like? And I'll give you, this happened tonight. I'll try to make this as short as I can, because I'm kind of having fun with you guys. I really like you guys. I do. I really like
I'm having a good time. It's like I'm hosting with Puck again. I'm even interrupting him just like I was on the show.
No, I interrupt Jason all the time because because he just, I got to keep, we got to keep on. So I'm trying to answer your questions directly. I think there's value in direct answers to questions. So I'm really trying my best to do that and not be like,
yeah, guys, look, I apologize. I wasn't trying to make a judgment on your pursuit of faithfulness. If it came out that way, I don't.
I get that you probably didn't mean for it to come across that way, but I would like you to realize two things. Yeah. First of all, that we've heard it in way more condescending ways. Yeah. Okay. So first, and second of all, there is no way to assume someone else's mental state or thought process in a way that doesn't come across as condescending.
You're right.
There is no way to do that.
Can I give you my little supernatural experience of the night?
Yes.
Okay. So do you guys have Sheetz in Texas? It's like a Wawa gas station where they got food and stuff.
No, we don't have it.
I know what it is, but we don't have it in Ohio.
Yeah. So I was with my son. My son's into like American Ninja stuff, and I was waiting for him. Well, no, actually, I picked my son up for American Ninja, and it doesn't really matter. But so I was there waiting on my other son to get done doing his thing, and I was at Sheetz, and he was ordering food, and we were at the table, and he's eating, and then he goes, Dad, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm like, dude, we were just waiting for like 15 minutes for the food. You didn't go to the bathroom then. Now we're going. He's 6, so I can't really fault him. But I'm like, okay, I'll take you to the bathroom, right? So I get outside the bathroom with Sheetz, and I hear this like loud commotion, like they're having a party in the bathroom. There's these 2 guys in there, and they're talking and laughing and whatever. So it's okay. Hey, one guy left, one guy stayed, and I look at him. He goes, "Motherfucking!" He's like cursing, and he didn't see my son because my son was kind of behind the bathroom wall, and he's like, "Man, look at his hand. His hand was like all swollen, right? It was just a ball." And he goes, "This hand ain't worth nothing." And I said, "Well, hey man, let me. This is what I do now, guys. This is how I operate now that I'm a born again person. I'm not making a statement. I'm just saying, for me, this is how I do things now." I said, "Well, hey, can I pray for your hand?" He goes, "Well, yeah, man, I believe in prayer. Okay." So he took his hat off, and I said, "All right, let me pray." And when I prayed, Dan and Puck, I spoke to the hand, because that's the example that I learned and keyed in on. I said, I spoke to it, and I said, "In Jesus' name, hand be healed." And I used to ask me, "Is everything spiritual?" And I believe, yeah, everything's spiritual. Everything happens spiritually. And I essentially evicted what I believe to be the evil spiritual aspect of that thing, and the pain and things that I don't believe are of God. I believe they're the evil one. And I started casting them out, and I spoke to that thing. And the guy looks up at me, and Jason, I told you on the way over, because we were talking before. The guy looks at me, he's dead in the eye, man. And he was just cursing like a sailor. And he goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Nick." And he goes, "I just felt the fire of God on my hand." And I said, well, yeah, praise God, man. I'm like, it's not me. It's just Jesus. This is what I do. And he goes, he's moving his hand. He goes, I've been like this for 3 days. And this is tonight. It just happened. Like, what time is it? 10. It happened 3 hours ago, I think. Yeah. And the guy's hand swelling starts going down. I mean, it wasn't completely healed, but it started going down. And he's like, the dude couldn't keep it together. He was crying. And I walk, and I'm happy. He's hugging me, and this guy. It was like this experience that just doesn't typically happen in life. It doesn't even happen in Christianity, but it happens to me now because things are different. Miracles and atheists. Like, I didn't want to talk to you guys like 5 years ago. I didn't want to know about atheists. You guys intimidated me. You use good vocabulary that I don't have. And I hear what you're saying, and I was scared because I didn't want to let go of my face. I thought you convinced me that it was wrong and just stupid. And I felt like, I thought that was my impression of atheists. I don't have anything to do with you, but I felt like, hey, you need to bring people that have had supernatural stuff happen to them in front of atheists and have them talk. And that's what I did with you, Dan, like 5 years ago. That was like I did that because I felt called to do it. I didn't feel like, oh, this would be interesting to bring people together and just, talk about it. I didn't want to talk to you guys, man. Like, I love you. I love you now. Absolutely. I don't know if I loved you then, but I love you guys, man. So, but this stuff happens to me now. And it's the thing that Christians are getting wrong is that this is how we're supposed to live. We're supposed to be life and light. And all we're doing is just kind of like trying to convince you guys that you're wrong and we're right. And it's stupid. Like, if we got to, like, the church needs to unify. And I personally believe that we're going to get to the point where, we're going to see that unification and things are going to start. If God is real, he's going to start kind of piecing these things together. And he's shaking his church right now, guys. I'm not sure if you noticed. There's all kinds of pastors falling by the wayside right now.
Can I ask you both a question?
It's
a follow-up to your question, Nick.
Well, can you respond?
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was my experience tonight. You asked me a supernatural experience. I believe that was supernatural. Did I see lights? No, or did I, whatever? Did I see like an aura or like a fog or like a mist? But he felt something I didn't feel when I touched his hand. I didn't feel any of that. But he said he felt the fire of God. What is the fire of God? I don't know what that means. Did he feel warmth, burning? Electricity. Some people describe it as electricity, but I didn't feel any of that. I just put my hand on him in a genuine way. I just commanded the swelling to go down, and I started seeing changes, man.
If you had never had experienced the supernatural, would you still hold the belief in Christianity?
They teach us that we're supposed to still hold the belief and not experience the supernatural. It would have been tough, man. Okay. It would have been tough. Yeah.
That was my question for you guys. It's the inverse of that. What would it take for you to believe, and how does that inform your life after? Do you become evangelist?
So,
Dan, go please.
It depends on what you mean by belief. Christianity is not a single claim. It is a complex, right? It instantiates. I mean, it's not only just a single belief claim or even a series of belief claims. It also is a philosophy that informs your sense of morality. It's also a historical narrative. I mean, it's sometimes a political philosophy even. Like, it can say a lot about who you are and what you believe. So I think you'd have to clarify
a supernatural encounter with Jesus Christ. What do you do after that? What do you need to
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So I have a supernatural encounter with Jesus Christ.
Yep.
What would I do with that information?
Yeah. How do you then live that out?
I've never had at least from my perception of my being and as I've existed as a person, I've never had a supernatural experience. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know.
That's a question. That's a good segue for my previous question for you, because you said you thought you had a supernatural deal, and then you rationalized it to be a material.
Well, I mean, maybe like yourself, Nick, and maybe like other Christians who watch this or who are formerly identified as Christians, whatever, in the church lifestyle and in the Christian community, you are called upon to pray to God in your hardships, and you're also called to believe in him with full force and full faith. And I definitely tried to do that with the hardest of my being. Sometimes it was harder to believe in other times, right? Because you go through periods of doubt and you go through these other things. But through all of that, I experienced sometimes a sense of peace, sometimes a sense of joy, all the things that are described from this fruit as the fruits of the Holy Spirit. right? The things that are supposed to be there if you have the Holy Spirit in you. And that's what I thought I had, was the Holy Spirit in me. So in that sense, that was my supernatural experience, right? It was the sort of uncanny ability to feel what I would describe as the peace of God or the love of God in situations in my life where I needed it. And sometimes even when I least expected it, I attributed that to a supernatural. I don't attribute that to a supernatural anymore. And
So
the reason I attribute that to being part of a collective culture that interprets times of stress, interprets times of peace, and interprets certain emotions and feelings as supernatural. I think that's where I got that from. If I had grown up in a Muslim culture, I would have said that was the will of Allah helping me. If I had grown up in a Hindu culture, I would probably say that that's one of the Advaitas, would describe what that kind of sense came from. I think my culture informed my reality in a very strong and very real way. And without those without the context of Christianity, if I hadn't grown up in a white Christian neighborhood, I don't know if I would have interpreted that as particularly that of coming from the Christian religion in any respect.
It's a good question to ask yourself for sure. Yeah, I mean, if Christianity, like, did we just luck out having the truth and the other ones didn't? And then what does God do about the other ones? I think that's a really good question that I've asked myself and sort of pondered and come to my own, I guess, thoughts about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's the biggest challenge, and to be transparent with you, in Christianity for me is, okay, we are called, this is the thing also that we don't talk about too much is, and nobody's got a problem with Christianity kind of keeping it to themselves, but that wasn't the charge, right? We're called to spread it across all the nations. And so what happens if we don't reach all the nations and they die before they're doomed to hell because we didn't get to them? That's a tough question to ask. And I can't give you a solid answer on that other than through kind of like you were talking about, Puck, like I've heard testimonies of people finding Jesus, like in mosque when they're doing their pilgrimage to Mecca. People would show up and they'd start speaking that didn't know how to speak Arabic, and they start speaking the language. And there's a particular testimony that comes to mind where a guy touched another guy's chest, and he's got like a white imprint on his hand, and he immediately became a follower of Christ at the mosque. So like I would like to think, and this is just, again, it's anecdotal, but to rationalize this idea of, well, we just got lucky and these people didn't, so God must be evil if he didn't want these people to go. I think if people do, you have these cultures where, like in the Hindus and stuff, you're doing all these rituals and they're doing all these stuff, but there's like this guy on the side who just doesn't, something's off, and he's looking at things differently, and he's, kind of Jason said, he's truly going out. He's like, man, it doesn't feel right. It's got to be something else. And I think God's going to reach those people that have the heart. And how do you determine that? Is there a formula to it, man? I don't know, but I think
there's people in Christian communities that feel that way too, that there's something that's off, and then they end up becoming atheists.
And absolutely, man. And the thing that I realized, Dan, after my experience, man, is like, if we have a great commission to go reach the world with the gospel, like the people, like there's at least half, probably maybe even 70% of the people in the church, they don't got it, because I didn't have it. I thought I was saved the whole time.
It's pretty sad. I think that's a really sad world too, because there about like a third of the world is Christian, and then a lot of that. Sorry, what was that?
They say they are.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying nominally say they're Christian, right? And then you've got another section that's Catholic and Eastern Orthodox and Protestant. So one of those may be right, maybe two, maybe all of them. You have to go into smaller subsections, and really, it's only just a small population of the world that you're saying actually is saved.
Right, and that's biblical too, right? The path of destruction's wide and truth is narrow.
So like those Aborigines that we talked about, they're probably going to hell.
Man, I can't speak to that because I don't know the.
Through no fault of their own other than geography, mind
Didn't you just say that only a few people are saved though? Like only a few people have. Like the Aborigines definitely don't have it, right?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Here's another question to ask: is if it doesn't impact you, why does it bother you? This is my argument.
Whoa. Right. Whoa.
Oh my God!
Now we're getting to it because people who believe that they have some sort of a connection to a divine authority,
Right.
vote in my jurisdiction.
Yes. Listen, we just lost abortion rights in this country. There's people openly
Oh, so
advocating for
we should
Christian
openly murder
nationalism.
babies then. We should murder children.
Jason, I don't know if you want to go there right now, my friend.
Yeah,
we
we're
talk
already
about
hours
our
in.
platform
This
all
is
the
not.
time, brother.
I'll be honest. I have no problem with like leaving this podcast right now.
It's
okay.
Dan, but I want more though. Can we just get off the abortion real quick? Because
yes.
we'll
I'd like to be
that's a different
respected in my positions here if we're going to have a conversation. Okay. Listen, Christians run this country. You understand that? They've run a lot of the world. You guys are privileged. I don't know if you realize that. You are privileged, supremely privileged. Even right now in this conversation, you had the audacity of questioning my authenticity and speaking truth. And you're not the first person to do that, Jason, and you won't be the last. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think that you've been questioned quite the same way as I have in the time that I've been an atheist. And that is the privilege that you possess. You possess a privilege because you have your voting block, as Puck has mentioned, is the most powerful in this country, and we're one of the most powerful countries in the world. What you believe is incredibly important to my life because it affects how I get to live my life and what I can and can't do. So yes, I actively have conversations with people who believe, not because I necessarily think I'm going to deconvert them or anything. I don't think one person necessarily has the power to do that. I think it more is so that you can think and have conversations with us and realize we're people too. And yes, we also want to seek truth, even if we do come to different conclusions than yourself.
Dan, I want to honor what you said. Well, Dan, I want to honor you in what you said from the perspective that I get what you're saying because there's far too many self-proclaimed Christians that are acting the way that you're describing and do the things that you're saying. I would disagree in your statement to say Christians run this country because I don't believe that Christians run this country. I believe the enemy does under the false pretenses of appearing to be a Christian. Well, really not. I don't believe that's Christianity at all. I think, man, Christianity itself
maybe theologically it's different there, Nick, but in the 2016 election and also in the 2020 election, the greatest predictor for voting Republican is if you are a white evangelical Christian, right? Okay. Greatest more than any other socioeconomic group, more than any other religious belief. That's one of the greatest predictors. So there is a political base there, whether or not the theology is true, whether or not you agree with that theology, that we have to take under consideration if we want to, again, live in a free and democratic society. Right.
And you know where it starts? You guys really genuinely know where it's where all this starts is what I said 2 hours ago, that Dan and I will never, I can't say Dan, I'm just going to speak for me. I'm never going to assume that I know another person's intents or mental states.
Right.
Yeah.
That is something that you guys are happily doing to us. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you are willing to say you are not seeking honestly enough. Otherwise you would have found answers.
Yeah.
Can we walk away just making that pact? The four of us. Let's start with the four of us. We will never assume we know better another person's mental state better than they do.
Absolutely, I make that. I agree with you.
So if Dan and I say we honestly, earnestly searched, I had my own church in Alaska. I had my own Bible study. I went through a lot. Okay, I don't want to go through my whole history here. And Dan's entire history is on the internet on many different channels. So
sure,
he can do that, but. Can we at least take each other at our word? Just the four of us. Let's start with the four of us. And then when you look at someone like me who came to a conclusion other than yours, can we at least please come to a conclusion other than, well, he must not have honestly, earnestly searched, or otherwise he would be one of us over here. Because I'm not going to do that to you. I listen to your story, Nick, and I hear your story about healing someone's hand or at least having them feel the touch of God. And if that happened to me, if I touched someone in that way, I wouldn't be doing a podcast tonight. I would be in the emergency room seeing if it was for real. So that's the difference between me and you. I validate your story. I believe that you believe that that's how it happened. And I'm going to give it to you. Okay. Is it what I would have done? No. But I'm going to at least take you at your word. And I'm going to at least take when you describe your internal feelings, your internal processes, I trust that that's actually, you're conveying to me what you are actually feeling. What I'm hoping is that you guys can give, just to start, me and Dan, that same courtesy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I respect and honor you with that. I will. I want to tell you that I have very bad experiences going to emergency rooms. I've been kicked out for praying for people in emergency rooms. Why did I get kicked out? Because they don't allow us to like essentially.
Well, yes, because people can't be healed with their consent, but at the same time, there are other people who are like, okay, I'm taking medication for 4 different ailments right now.
Can
okay?
I pray for you?
My wife's uncle is in the hospital right now. We don't know if he's going to come out. And when I hear people like you talking about a hand, it makes me wonder why nobody's looking out for us.
Well, can I pray for your family?
Let's see if it works. Let's see if it does something.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. What are their names? And I don't. You didn't necessarily need to share their ailments, but can you give me like their names or something?
Not on public,
okay,
not in a place like this. But yeah.
Okay. How about why don't we sign off here publicly, and then or if I'll pray with them publicly if you want, but if you want to make it private, I'll do that too. Whatever you want to do.
I'm reminded of the verse which says that the man who prays in the closet, instead of the public. I think that applies in this situation.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
it's a good reference.
Here, I'll just make this commitment to you that if you don't want me praying with you, or we can just pray one-on-one after, or whatever you want, if you're open to it, just know that I will be praying for your family for whatever that is. I'll pray for them tonight, and we'll touch base. And it's not a test or anything. Just know that I really do genuinely believe that something will happen to your family. So there's an ER issue, and you said what else again? There's a terminal.
No. I'm just like me. I am taking medication for 4 different ailments right now.
Okay, yeah, your medication. So for 4 different things, I think you said.
Yeah,
and
I'm taking 4 different medications. Yeah.
You said there's a family member that's in the ER right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I'm going to pray that, and I thank you for the opportunity. And look, I really do. I think that's one of the things that's why I feel called to do this platform, because when I really want to genuinely listen to you guys, and I respect what you're saying. And I know that man, there's so many out there that just aren't walking out what we're supposed to be walking out in this faith. And I man, on behalf of those people, man, I apologize, because, and I know it's not my fault, but I hate that that's happened to you guys, because it's not right. And I saw the passion, Dan, in your eyes when you, even though you got the tinted glasses, I saw the passion.
They're not tinted. I just have very poor vision.
Oh, well, I'm reminded of, there's any, like the Tony Stark kind of, anyway, I like the look.
Thank you. They're new.
Thank you. Well, you're welcome. So I do apologize on behalf of the folks out there that have this arrogant sort of bulldozer sort of effect on societies. I personally think that if we were doing Christianity the way that I believe that God intended, then you wouldn't see some of the atrocities that you're seeing, and probably certainly wouldn't view this country being run by.
Everybody says that about their Christianity. Everybody says that about their Christianity. So
I can tell you that I said it genuinely. I mean, I
believe that, but I just like you got to hear where we're coming from, where we have 10,000 different Christian denominations all saying if everybody just did it our way, we'd be okay.
No, it's not even my way. It's not even my way. I don't really believe. I believe that.
Although they don't say it my way either. They say it if we just did it the right way.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But that's a fair statement to make, and I think that we just haven't learned how to do that. And I'm not even saying my way is the right way. All I'm saying is that my motivation is to try to be a light and love the people, not necessarily bulldozing them with hate and rhetoric. So I
promise you, Nick, it starts with not assuming their intentions.
Yeah,
I absolutely promise you that's where it starts.
And that's what I learned tonight, guys. I really have. I've learned that. And I learned this before when I first started doing that. How passionate you guys were with that assumption about what I believe or what I don't is very heartfelt and like it's real. So why would I ever want to assume what you guys believe? And I think asking questions and getting a balanced on the same page with where people are at, you don't know until they tell you. So making blanket statements like that isn't right. So I honor that, man, and I appreciate you guys kind of bearing with us through that, because we're all learning. I think you guys did great, and Jason, you as well, man. I think we didn't talk about Russia and Ukraine much because I had a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to kind of present. But you know what? Let me ask you this question. I know what I think I'm, based on my experience with working with skeptics and atheists in the past, I've never met a conservative atheist before.
Oh, they definitely exist. They write into my show all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
there are a number even on the YouTube sphere. There are a number who are very proud to be conservative atheists.
I would like to, maybe you guys can make me a connection. I'd love to talk to at least one of them. But do you agree that like the majority, if you had like a handful of 10 of them, most of them are going to be on the left?
According to Pew Research, right, at least 7 out of 10 atheists are usually left leaning, and that's a pretty conservative estimate, I'd say.
Okay, so we're tracking together on that. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think
because religiosity and conservatism actually map very neatly onto each other. You both believe in similar things. For example, a naturally established hierarchy. Some people are just, even if we do try to do a number of things to make society more equal, the cream's still going to rise to the top. And so, I mean, there's a lot of common beliefs between religiosity and conservatism that map very neatly onto each other. I don't think that they're both related to each other, and if they are, it's more that they're both symptoms of the same kind of thought process that leads to that kind of conclusion, rather than you are conservative, therefore you have a society where you live in American society, you're more likely to believe in God, because goodness knows there's plenty of conservative foreigners out there and nationalist foreigners who they don't espouse any religious views about it. And the opposite, there are a lot of very progressive Christians. Dan, I think you did a month's worth of shows with them. So I don't think they so much have anything to do with each other, so much that they appeal to the same kind of people.
I would add that when you talk about religious traditions such as the American evangelical tradition, they openly talk about political issues, right? Like at the pulpit, they will engage to talk about abortion issues, for example, right? And so like there is a strong connection there between, again, I already said this before, but the voting patterns for 2016 and 2020, one of the best indicators for knowing what somebody's going to vote for was if they're a white evangelical, right? So that's a
501c3 thing, Dan, where they're not allowed to if they're a 501c3.
Yeah, they're not allowed to, but they do it anyway. Churches violate that all the time. But with the nonprofit that I work with this, the Atheist Community of Austin, the rule is that you can't advocate for particular political candidates, right? So
you can't just a person or a party, but you can have a platform.
Correct. Right? So we can't say go vote for Joe Biden, but we can say, I agree with this policy.
I got you.
Right? So there's no legal complication there.
Can I make one comment that's completely, Puck, I just realized you have purple hair, don't you?
Blue, but yeah.
Blue. I thought it was a reflection. The whole time I'm looking at you, I thought that was a reflection from your t-shirt.
No. It really is bright blue. It's
like a chameleon. His hair changes every month.
Your shirt's blue right now.
Yes.
Purple.
Cobalt blue. Yeah.
Okay. Cobalt blue.
He's a blue-haired SJW feminist.
I am high undercut and everything.
Yeah.
That's
let's talk gender ideology one of these days, guys. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. We're 2 hours in. We're not going to start.
We are, and I'm over time, and I want to respect your. Gosh, we're more than 2 hours in. This was fun, man. I really do like you guys, and I could talk to you for hours because I think we're getting like it takes this long to unpack. I was doing the 4-hour thing before, Dan. I'm not sure if you remember. Like I used to go on for 4 hours, but it wasn't with one guest. I'd switch it. So just as it got good, I'd have to stop. So now I kind of get like the long form talk radio because you really start getting into the meat of things. You're like, man, I don't want to, but I got to get up for work tomorrow. So I what do you do with this? I mean, I'd love to get back together, you guys. Puck, since you're getting back into content creating, let's that'd be awesome too. But let's just close this out. Briefly. I'd like to again honor you guys for being on here. I thank you for it. It's I took a long break. I took the summer off because I was getting burned out and I was trying to figure out where God wants me to take this thing. Political came to the mind, and I think that what we were talking about there at the end with the left and the atheist community and the right and the Christian, I think there's a lot that we can unpack there. I think it'd be fascinating. We're kind of getting into the details about that kind of stuff without, hopefully we can take the emotions out of it. I think we're now there's not enough platforms like this, Dan and Puck. And there's not where we're kind of bringing each other together and actually trying to hear the other side because it's just a bunch of echo chambers. I agree with a lot of things that are on like let's just give an example, like conservative platforms like True Social, but you go in there and it's an echo chamber, and you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. And the brave ones are the atheists that are coming on there and doing the opposite. I respect the heck out of those guys, because it's like a lion's den for those guys, and vice versa. Like if I were to go on, I don't know, I don't know, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like we're not getting together enough and having these conversations. And
I try to do that every week on my show, so I'm just saying. I'm
I know you are. And I appreciate that. There's not enough Christians, probably. Maybe there are, right, calling in, but I mean, the combative type. I don't know.
I learned. I got a lot from this show. It really opened my eyes to some different perspectives. So I probably approached this with a little bit of ignorance, and to be honest, I don't really engage with the other side much. Nick does a lot more. I did learn this recently. I spent hours with one of my neighbors, self-proclaimed atheist, and there's a few times I saw him really, he was really reaching. He was really just, he grew up in the church, long story, but I could tell there was some glimmer in his eye. Like he was looking for some truth, maybe experientially. And I think I'd spent probably about 10 or 12 hours over the course of weeks, just unpacking all the mysteries of the faith, hearing from his perspective, all the things. And I realized that all that, I never once invited him over for dinner. It really made me think about, am I really actually living up to what I believe? And actually, believe it or not, and this is something, if you guys really want to know the hard truth about Christianity, we have a harder and more difficult assignment in the sense that God holds us to the highest standard possible. So when we're falling short of it, it's actually worse if we never had it to begin with. So keep asking those questions, keep challenging us to be righteous. And I would just say, like, it's not that you guys didn't do the hard work. You guys are very professional. I could tell the kinds of questions you have searched. It's just, I don't know, maybe God will tell me one day why he chose me, because I was doing the exact opposite of following his word. And I would just say, until I just, like I say, humbled myself, but until I actually just said, my ways aren't working anymore, I'll give it a shot. Why not? And he met me where I'm at. And you know what? I still fall short all the time. I still sin. I still do tons of stupid stuff. I probably do a lot of things that my non-believing counterparts probably best me at. You guys probably have amazing relationships with your spouses, and just, I really do want you guys to find peace and happiness. I just, for whatever reason, God chose to reveal himself to me, and I can't not share. But I will say this though, you guys do the hard work. And you should be proud of that, because a lot of people just want to throw in the sound bite and not actually do the deep work. So hopefully we'll engage again.
3 words. I'll start with you, Puck. Not start, but I'll continue with you. If you wouldn't mind giving like a 30-second closing words, that'd be great.
Me?
Yeah, please.
No, I appreciate the time, and thank you guys very much for allowing us on here and having the nice open dialogue. I do believe that it could go in many different branches, but I appreciate that you guys were willing to have it. There's so many ways where this can go. But yeah, we got to wrap this up in a nice, neat little bow. 2 hours into it, but thank you all very much. It's nice coming back.
Thank you. Objectively, Dan.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on. If you ever want to continue the conversation, you're free to do that live at 7 p.m. Central every Friday night on Truth Wanted, and you can call into the show. And as long as you pass our call screener check and you're not like a Nazi, I'll probably talk to you. So,
And you won't have to deal with the blue-haired fella there too. It's all going to be this very nice, well-presented Dan who's going to be there.
Puck may be there if I let him. But
Dan, how could we call in? I'm asking this for myself as well. 7 p.m. Central, which is 8 p.m.
Yeah, it's live on the Truth Wanted YouTube channel. And the number's on the screen there if you want to call in. And I always have a different guest with me every week. Sometimes I have Christians on as co-hosts. It's been a bit since I've done that, but it's been about a year actually.
I have a quick comment. It seems like, and I've listened to the Atheist Experience and SkepGen. It seems like a lot of atheists and skeptics love Magic the Gathering. Is this just a stereotype, or do you guys actually play?
I played Magic the Gathering for the first time about 2 months ago. I told a friend, I was like, hey, I'm like really bored. Like, what do you want to do? And he was like, you want to play Magic? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I've not, listen, I'm I'm in the atheist community, and I know I'm a fucking nerd, but I don't play fucking Magic the Gathering. All right, but I played it, and it's actually pretty fun.
There you go. It's pretty fun. There you go.
I played for a hot minute in the late '90s, and never since.
But you know what? I still haven't done Dungeons and Dragons, so.
And it's different levels, man.
You know,
different levels. When you're really a fundamentalist, you're going to be super deep in D&D, but we'll get you there.
Well, thank you guys again. Learn something. Just encourage more of these. Dan, if you ever want a Christian on your side again after a year, I'd be happy. I'm more than willing to dialogue with you anytime you want.
Sounds good.
No, man. All right. Well, we're going to go and end the broadcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're still trying to work out the kinks and everything. And maybe Dan, you can kind of school me on how to actually use Call-In Studio, because I'd
be happy to.
All right. All right. Signing off. You guys, I don't know. It's always kind of awkward at the end of the show. Like when I go live, are you guys going to click off, or are we going to?
You got to have a tagline. You don't have a tagline? Yes. You know.
Oh no, it's after the tagline, like when we're back in the backstage.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll stick around. I'll stick around. Yeah.
We should talk about this. I always forget to talk about it beforehand. Like, are they going to say goodbye to like official goodbye? Or do we do it anyway? All right, landing it.
Oh yeah.